Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday around 6 p.m. Central. Do you know where your war is? Yeah, there's a lot going on and a lot to get to, and I've got my guest Jay Michael will be bringing in shortly. But I want to say this right off the bat. We know that last night's Dying Out Loud got postponed. Just for the record, right now that's scheduled to be next Tuesday with Dave and Seth Andrews. If you are a theist and you have thoughts with regard to the Holy Land, God's promised land, God's people, why there are people fighting over a scrap of land that just is baffling and yet somehow sacred, feel free to call in. And if you just are a theist that wants to present your case for God or the supernatural or anything like that, yes, by all means, call in. Theists will always get priority here. We're not going to be spending the entire show or even a good chunk of it on what's going on in the Middle East. I addressed some of what's going on in Israel on Sunday, and I'll do a little bit more right now. The situation for me hasn't changed much. I still don't know enough, and I'm really frustrated that it's increasingly difficult to get good information in a way where you know you are getting good information. There's a lot of people who are getting their news from Twitter. By the way, Twitter went down like 10 minutes before we went live. I was trying to post the link to the show and nothing. And there was a big spike on the, is it down mark and everything else. It came back up just a couple minutes later, but it was definitely down for a brief moment. But people are getting their news from there. And the problem is that how do you know that what you're seeing is reliable? For example, I saw a video that was purportedly Hamas taking this action against this person for this reason. And generally speaking, I can look at it and say, I don't think that's a fake thing. And I generally trust this source. But how do I know that's from this instance? 75 years ago, we basically created a new nation of Israel. And over the last 75 years, we've allowed Israel to shuffle Palestinians into basically an open air prison in Gaza. And there's been a skirmish, a fight, a war, conflict every handful of years. How do we know which atrocity is from which time period? And is this what it's supposed to be? It's very little that we can actually go and investigate. And the news, if you're watching the news sources, may not be that much better. It's nice that they're putting people on the ground to report on what's being seen, and we're getting live coverage of bombings. But if you're mostly getting your news off Twitter, I would highly recommend that you start checking out some primary sources and watching news sources from around the world so that you're not just getting Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or BBC America or whichever sources you're getting it from. Use several. And still try to be measured. Because, as I mentioned on Sunday, I don't know enough. And I know from the past and from the actions that Hamas is a terrorist organization that without warning did a land, air, and sea attack on Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem has a right to defend itself. But where does that right end? Where does the right to defend itself against things become retaliatory against perhaps even the wrong people? The average age of people in the Gaza Strip is 18. Now, the nation of Israel was created 20 years before I was born, and I'm an old fuck. I'm not going to be fighting in any war. Let's just face it. I did my time in the Navy. I'm not going to be in any war. I don't have a dog in this fight from I'm likely to be drafted or a standpoint. And yet I really, really care and am frustrated by what I've seen going on. And I would love to say, how much of this is religion's fault? I get it. It's I do shows about religion. If you have religious views on this, cool. I'd rather talk about just general religious views, but if you have something that's relevant to it, I'd like to know. I'd love to point out that basically we have religious zealots running countries, religious zealots running terrorist organizations, and They're battling over land that everybody seems to think God has ordained to them in some way or another. Not only has Israel decided to cut off food, water, fuel, and electricity to the Gaza Strip, which is, by the way, part of the reason this is happening. And I'll get back to that in a second. But now Hezbollah from Lebanon in the north has now fired missiles into Israel. So Israel's fighting or basically bombing Gaza on the southern border. And they did their little PR move of get out of Israel, but get out of Gaza, but we all know that's not a practical possibility. Not only does Israel not allow people to leave Gaza to come into Israel, but Egypt frequently closes the southern border as well. They just don't have options. The fact that Israel as a nation can cut off food and water and electricity to the people in Gaza is part of the problem. That's the position of being the occupier. That's a position of power. That's the position of control. Doesn't matter how much, how nice Israel might be to people or whatever else. None of that matters. They have this position of control. And so you've got Palestinians who have absolutely no control over their life, or next to no control. I don't want to exaggerate by going to absolutes and grandstanding. But you've got Jews and Muslims in the area, and then you've got Christians supporting them from around the world. This is a mess that was originally mostly created by the British Empire, and then attempted to be fixed by the United Nations. And it is just an absolute hot mess that seems never ending. And I don't know what the right thing to do is. I'm not going to pretend to know what the right thing to do is. There's no good guy here. But I would hope that if there was anybody that we cared about, that we would say, these people shouldn't bear the brunt of it. It might be those countless under 18 individuals in Gaza that are paying the price for something that there's almost nobody alive who truly remembers, who can actually act and do anything. So this is like the Hatfields and McCoys, where it's become a generational thing passed down, and it's about honor, and it's about what your ancestors did to my ancestors. And at some point you have to draw a line and say, okay, all of that sucked. Everybody was fucking wrong, or these people were wrong, or whatever, but we're starting over now. That's what they've tried to do many times, and they can't come to any agreement. So instead of that, I'm going to say that while I have generally been happy with most of the things that President Biden's done, I have some objections to some of it. I also have some objections to Biden's statement or statements about what's going on in the Middle East. I think, like many other people, he is far too pro-Israel as a de facto position, and offering up, unfettered support for Israel. And I get it. They're our allies. I also want to say that I know how the system works a little bit. And I suspect that as president, there are certain things he can say and certain things he can't say without really putting our treaties and other things at risk. But the person who I wish was president made a statement today. And so I'm going to read this statement from Senator Bernie Sanders and just say that as someone who could have been president, as someone whose views and statements I continually respect, Bernie Sanders did not disappoint me on this, and his views represent mine about as close as we can get to me actually having a position, given how difficult it is to understand the complicated situation and be reasonably informed. Here's what Senator Bernie Sanders said. Hamas's terrorist assault on Israel will have horrific short and long-term consequences. As a result of this attack, thousands of Israelis and Palestinians, including many women and children, have been killed and injured. That toll will rise. The gunning down of young Israelis at a music festival is an image the world will not soon forget. Longer term, this attack is a major setback for any hope of peace and reconciliation in the region and justice for the Palestinian people. For years, people of goodwill throughout the world, including some brave Israelis, have struggled against the blockade of Gaza, the daily humiliations of occupation in the West Bank, and the horrendous living conditions faced by so many Palestinians. For many, It is no secret that Gaza has been an open-air prison with millions of people struggling to secure basic necessities. Hamas's terrorism will make it much more difficult to address that tragic reality and will embolden extremists on both sides, continuing the cycle of violence. Right now, the international community must focus on reducing humanitarian suffering and protecting innocent people on both sides of this conflict. The targeting of civilians is a war crime, no matter who does it. Israel's blanket denial of food, water, and other necessities to Gaza is a serious violation of international law and will do nothing but harm innocent civilians. The United States has rightly offered solidarity and support to Israel in responding to Hamas's attack, but we must also insist on restraint from Israeli forces attacking Gaza and work to secure UN humanitarian access. Let us not forget that half of the 2 million people in Gaza are children. Children and innocent people do not deserve to be punished for the acts of Hamas. That was released today by Bernie Sanders. As I said, it's as close, it's better than my best thoughts at representing where I am on this issue. If you're somewhere different, that's potentially worth discussing. But what I see from people on the right and on the left are blanket support for Israel. That can't continue. It should have never existed, but it absolutely can't continue. You have a right-wing Israeli government right now. You have Israel as the perpetrator of humanitarian issues, at least in these areas. I don't know what the solution would be. I would hope that Bernie Sanders, President Biden, and others are working to be the better angels of our nature, because I also see a lot of people opportunistically making use of this to say the simplest things that are absolutely vile. I watched people at what was supposed to be a pro-Israel rally in New York City. Multiple people at this rally blatantly calling for death to all Arabs. Multiple people at this rally wanting Gaza turned into a parking lot. Israeli government has referred to Palestinian people as human animals in order, once you dehumanize them, you can then justify whatever you do against them. The Israeli people aren't innocent. The United States isn't innocent. Palestine isn't innocent. The individuals that are suffering in these conditions, they're not all innocent either. But when you actually say you're either with us or against us, or if you don't agree with this, you are on a par with the terrorists, or you are part of the problem, that mentality that does point out one-sidedness in this, which is a problem, but that mentality of you are part of the problem is the exact same mentality that Hamas uses to target civilians, because the civilians they target are the people who are supportive of the government that they view as their oppressors. That same reasoning of you're part of the problem is how we got here. We got here with one side having power and the other side having lost everything and feeling frustrated, saying, you know what? We know this organization are terrorists. We know they're going to do terrible things, but what else have we got left? That gross rationalization coming from desperation is what leads to things like this. And there are countless children that are going to die. I know. Somebody out there's like, oh, look, here we go again. Think of the children. Think of the children. You know what? If your brain went to the, oh my God, think of the children. Look, they're using the children as props again. Just go away. Because we're talking about innocent people being killed, fighting for a scrap of land that a number of different groups feel they have a right to, with no justification at all. And atrocities being committed, and those atrocities being supported for good reasons in bad ways by people, including my country. on that front. I'm going to bring J Mike in to solve the entire world's problems. Mike told me before the show started that he absolutely knows exactly how to fix all of these issues in the Middle East. So yeah, hey, come on in and let's fix the world here in the next 20, 30 minutes.
No, I want to echo both Sanders and yourself are saying, because I was saying it before. There's a lot to digest. You go back, you look at 1948, right? You start going back, you brush off everything, and you're trying to put the pieces together. But then there's also this issue that we were talking about where you kind of have to sift through all the new information. You have to apply a proper skepticism. Is this being, are things that are being posted on Twitter being pulled from websites from years ago from unrelated things or some semi-related? And so, yeah, there's not really much I can say. I would just 100% second what you said because of that issue, and people have been really kind of rash to just make these judgments. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it's been really difficult. First of all, let me make some announcements real quick. If you're planning on calling, get your calls in now. There have been people who've been waiting until very late in the shows to get their calls in. And some people I know, they've been on hold for an hour, hour and a half, on rare occasions, even as much as 2 hours. But there are actually, well, there are some calls already, but there are also lines open. If you wait too long to get in, you may not get to talk. And here's your opportunity, because Mike and I are both, I don't know, I guess philosophy geeks, religious geeks. There are a few things that I know both of us like more than engaging in conversations about whether or not there's a good reason to believe any of these religious claims. And considering that what's going on in the Middle East is partially tied to their religious beliefs, and I'm not remotely saying it's all there. This is a complex mess of socio-political issues and religious issues. But if you think that we need to support Israel because there's a second coming of Jesus that's going to be happening as part of an Armageddon, if you're into this end time thing, I want to know why you think that's real and why you think it's a good thing, and why your God is slaughtering children and making Israel out to look as bad in many cases, not all, but in many cases as bad as the people that they are potentially fighting against. Why do we need to do this? What do you think's going to happen? If we, and I don't mean we as in the United States or anybody else, but if we as a world turned the entirety of what is now Israel into a sheet of glass, destroying everything, destroying Jerusalem, destroying the Wailing Wall, if all of that got taken out, there would still not be a second coming of Jesus for you to be waiting on. There's no reason to think any of that's true. And so if we set aside this push to support Israel, I don't support Israel. Israel's a country. I support Jews. I don't support Islam, but I support Muslims. I don't support Palestine, but I support Arabs. This issue about national boundaries, I don't know. And if you've got a mind on it with regard to religion, it's probably time to get in. So, and I see calls are lighting up left and right. Let me make the quick announcements, and Mike and I'll just get right into calls, because I don't know how long we're going to run tonight. Probably not as long as we have been, but I'm excited actually engaging, get some calls going here. So first of all, huge thank you to the Apostate Paul for screening our calls tonight, and to Margan and Cookies, and who else is moderating in there tonight? There's probably more. How to Rule an Asteroid's a mod in there, and I bet I've never mentioned that name before once. Anyway, in addition to this program right here on the Line Network, this is the Hang Up on Wednesday nights. It's my baby. But on Thursday, my other baby will be here for the Transatlantic Call-In Show. You're going to get the OG Katy and Arden in here at 2 p.m. Central to take your calls on trans rights, trans issues, and things like that. If you have concerns about, what you've heard, the myths and lies that you potentially heard. We talk about the difficulty of figuring out the sources of what's going on in the Middle East right now. It's also difficult to figure out what's going on with regard to trans rights around the world. And I got, Marjorie Taylor Greene is, no matter who gets to be speaker, my issue is going to be the same, lists off her top issues. And one of her top issues is children getting transgender surgery, which isn't really a thing, not at any rate for anybody to be worried about. And yet this is their platform. This is what they market off of. This is what they fundraise off of. Fear mongering is their baby. So tomorrow's Transatlantic Call-In Show with Katie and Arden. Sunday show will be myself and Dave Warnock. Monday will be Gutsa Gibbons' first show hosting Skeptalk as the primary host. She's just like hot buttered awesome. Like Monday's a busy day for us here because Tuesday is trash day, so we do all the rat stuff. I will definitely be listening to Erica while we're doing all the other stuff because every time I listen to her, I learn something new. Same thing with Forrest, and it's just great to have her on here as the new host of Skeptalk. Tuesday is going to be Dave Warnock and Seth Andrews, which is rescheduled from last week. And next Wednesday, I'll be back with a hang up again, but I can't tell you who my guest is. I mean, I could, but I'd have to kill you.
Well, I have to say, because I got to fortunately get to spend some time hanging out with you and Forrest a month or so ago, and it got to the point where like I felt that I needed like a pen and pad. Because Forrest was like, "Do you want to know something really cool about the ear canal? I can tell you so much stuff about it." And he'd just go on and go on. He'd be like, "And also this other thing is great. It's great. I love it." So Forrest is exactly who he is on camera, off camera. It's great. He is a just bed of information.
I love when he gets to come down and hang out. It's a little too far for me to drive up to Oklahoma, but there are a lot of reptile shows in the Texas and Oklahoma and southern Missouri area. And the next time there's one up in Tulsa, I might take one up there because I get to hang out with a few of my friends that way. But let's get to some calls. We have Sid, no pronouns preferred, somewhere in America, is a theist who wants to discuss genetic entropy. Wow. Welcome, Sid.
Yes, sir. Yep. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.
Sure.
First time caller.
Well, welcome.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, I wanted to see what y'all's opinion was on genetic entropy.
Is this Sanford's, the thing that Dr. Sanford talks about a lot, the geneticist?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I want to talk about like the future of it and the past of it, and afterward, like, I guess let me ask: do y'all agree that the only way mutations in the genome get selected out is through natural selection?
Well, me and my response doesn't have anything to do with your argument, right? So what's the argument?
Well, just to make sure, I'm in agreement here, but just to make sure that Sid gets an answer. I think there are factors, there are potentially factors beyond mere natural selection that impact our genome we're not really engaged in like eugenics and that sort of selection, but we're adjusting basically what features of nature are most likely to impact our genome and potentially the genomes of other species on the planet. I don't know if what you're asking is natural selection all, or do we impact it? If that's still part of natural selection in your view, then yeah, I'm fine with that.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, like, since we don't have natural selection really anymore on the human genome, wouldn't that lead to eventually we're going to keep accumulating mutations in our genetic sequence to the point where
I guess I'm a little confused because my understanding of natural selection is that it selects. Well, the idea is that it selects for the phenotype, right? The phenotypic trait. That's my understanding. So I'm not really sure what you're talking about with mutations on natural
But I
selection.
think, Sid, did you just say that that humans are no longer part of natural selection? Because I don't think that's true.
I didn't hear that.
I might have misheard.
Well, I mean, like, there's no more like survival of the fittest or anything like that. It's just like,
Sure, there is.
Wait, what?
Every single individual is a transitional form to its offspring, or potential transitional form to its offspring. And there are still factors in nature that select against things. If you have a child, for example, that has a genetic mutation that doesn't allow its survival, then it won't survive. And that's still natural selection, and that still happens today.
well, yeah, I'm not talking about survival. Like, if it's just slightly deleterious, it'll be passed on, and then it kind of adds up over time to the point where
That is all of evolution. Slight changes that accumulate over time.
Okay, I've heard several geneticists say that it's pretty much unanimous consensus that the human genome is deteriorating.
No, this is not. No, wait. Hold on. You're talking about because this is where you're going to go into Sanfords View, because from my understanding that's not that's not accepted at all. This is just like some fringe view that someone has with the misunderstanding of mutations and how the sun is an external input for energy.
But
Well, I mean, it's not. Oh, go ahead.
let me try this. Let me just say this: as I'm not a scientist or a biologist or a geneticist, whether our genome's deteriorating or not, what's the point? What does that have to do with anything related to theism?
Well, I guess the point I was trying to get at is that in the near future, humans are going to go extinct because there's going to be so much of a genetic load that it eventually kind of wipes us out.
Yeah, you're saying there'll be a decline in the genetic information, and then because of this, subsequently will go extinct, right?
Yeah, and it's not just Stanford. You know, I looked. I don't know if Wikipedia is a credible source or not, but it lists several
that makes
geneticists that are worried about the effects of continual what do they call it, genetic load mutation.
I'm struggling.
I'm not,
because first of all, not a geneticist. It'd be nice maybe if Forrest was here to potentially address some of this stuff. What's the point? Whether it's degenerating or not, whether there's entropy impacting it or not, what's the point with regard to theism?
Well, yeah, I was going to get to that, to the past of it. I just wanted to see if y'all agreed with the future of it. Pretty soon humans are going to.
I don't know what the future is. I don't study genetics.
Yeah, I'll just say I don't, but I want you to try to link this, because so far we've established the idea, and you seem to agree with me that there's this decrease in the genetic information, will become extinct, whatever. Just assuming that your idea is on track. I'm not getting the inference to God. Like, what is that whole thing?
Well, that would be like the past part of it. So, like, what do y'all think about it's called a Mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal atom, I think.
Mitochondrial Eve is essentially a metaphor for our most recent common ancestor. It's not a single individual. Mitochondrial Eve changes as the population changes. As a previous generation dies off, that can change who the last ancestor of living humans is.
Wait, so, and you're saying the same thing with Y chromosomal atom, that he's not the real? I thought it was like our most closest ancestor that we all have in common.
Yes, and that changes. So right now, if you just looked at my family, every generation, the the most recent common ancestor for every new generation changes, it shifts.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this, but okay, let's just skip all that because it's not really our area. What does this have to do with God?
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. What I was getting to is that if you backtrack Mitochondrial Eve and Adam, that if you use, because I know they say it's like hundreds of thousands of years ago, but they base that on experimental mutation rates, theoretical, instead of if you base them on observable, testable mutation rates, that they're around like 5,000 years ago, which lines up with scripture.
No. So, first of all, even if it lined up with scripture, that wouldn't do anything to confirm the timeline of scripture, but I'll have to look it up. But mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam, first of all, don't necessarily have to be at the same timeline. And I think we're talking about 150 to 500,000 years ago.
We're on some really weird. We're on some real quick. We're on some like weird ground, right? Because we started with genetic entropy, which is not like an accepted thing in the scientific community. It's proposed by Sanford, and and it's highly motivated, from my view, towards this view on creationism. And so we're on a really weird ground because the thing that you're proposing, we don't have any reason to accept. There's no like novel predictions that we've generated based on this idea. No reason to accept it. And then we go into the other things, and it just sounds like we're stacking confusion on top of confusion. And I still am totally unsure how this gets to God, other than, well, this timeline here, dealing with mitochondrial Eve, will be like close with how scripture is determined. But then, like, so what? Like, even if I granted all of this, which there's no reason I should be that charitable, how does the inference follow that there's a supernatural being that created? Like, I don't get. That's just a giant leap. Even if I was as charitable as and again, there's no reason for me to be this charitable. Even if I was so charitable, I don't even see what the inference. I don't see what work any of the statements or propositions that me or Matt are supposed to accept. How all of a sudden that generates this conclusion to God. So I'm still really lost.
Well, I'm just trying to say it would line up with scripture, because if there's, just two people that we all come from, that lines up with the Genesis story of two people. Whereas in y'all's point of view, I don't really understand how it would work where we're all descended from one woman, but somehow all the other women that were on
nothing
Earth
to do.
My
view has nothing to do with the lack. My view has nothing to do. My view has nothing to do with the lack of success of your argument, right? Or lack of an argument.
Also, if you take a literal estimate of the age of the Earth from scripture that you're talking about, that's 6,000 to 10,000 years, roughly. But mitochondrial Eve's best date is 155,000 years ago. That's a whole order of magnitude and some change older than the Bible. And mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam didn't live at the same time and could have lived anywhere from 10,000 to 300,000 years apart. See, there's not a single entity that is mitochondrial Eve and a single entity that is Y chromosomal Adam. There's sort of a pocket for, if we look back at how far back we can go to trace our most recent female common ancestor and our most recent male common ancestor, those aren't a single couple that live together. They are not an Adam and Eve in a garden. They are, I guess, abstracted individuals that could have lived 10,000 to hundreds of thousands of years apart. That does not line up with the Bible at all.
Well, yeah, but that's assuming certain mutation rates, whereas if you go by observable mutation rates, it's actually way earlier. But I guess I would ask, like, can you explain to me how all the other women, because you believe there's a bunch of women on Earth at the same time as Mitochondrial Eve, right?
Yes.
Then how did all their progeny die off?
I don't
But
know how it
only,
happened. Well, I don't know how it
what?
happened, but they did.
And what would be the chance of that, like 1 in 100 or something?
It's 100%. The chance of that is 100%. We know it happened. We're tracing common lineage, and we find people outside of that lineage. That's why I said this shifts as the older generations begin to die off. That changes who has common ancestry. Just like if I don't have any kids, and also my brother doesn't have biological kids of his own. He has 2 adopted kids that are wonderful. But that means we are the end of this particular branch of the Dillahunty tree. There are not going to be any more descendants off of mine. And so, whereas if I would have had kids, that would change the branching to who has my mom as their last common ancestor. But nobody but me and my brother has my mom as their last common ancestor. And when we die, nobody will have my mom as their last common ancestor. So that whole thing gets pruned, and you go back to her mom. And now her mom, there are kids that continue to have her as a common ancestor. But if those kids don't procreate and they die off, then we'd have to go back to my great grandmother as the next common ancestor on that side. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. Well, let me get y'all's opinion. What if genetic entropy was true? Would that, really cause y'all's worldview to kind of
no
have to be
whatever's true is true. How does genetic entropy being true challenge my worldview? My worldview is to accept whatever is scientifically demonstrable, and I'm not convinced that there's a God. You have to demonstrate that there is a God. God doesn't suddenly become real because you find something new about science, about the world. You have to make a case for how this proves God. So how are you demonstrating the existence of God from this misunderstanding of evolution?
Yeah, you gotta feel. Yeah, this is precisely where I want to go, because just real quick, because either it's going to be just some argument from ignorance or incredulity. So like, help us fill in the blank, because it just sounds like I don't understand this thing, so God seems reasonable to me.
Well, my point is that if genetic entropy is true, that you can't have billions of years of life, because in every genome there would be like a ticking time bomb where eventually it goes to extinction because of all the accumulated genetic load. So the Earth could only be a few 1,000 years old. So that would get rid of
not 1,000 years. Not 1,000 years. You're assuming a number of things about whether or not any decay rate is constant, where it starts, whether or not it abates for periods of time, whether or not there's periods of stabilization. But we have a pretty good history of life, even though we don't understand all of it. What doesn't make sense is that the biblical God is real. That doesn't make sense given what we know about life and the age of the universe and evolution.
Right, but I'm assuming uniformitarianism. Like, I'm assuming part of your worldview.
It doesn't matter what you assume.
At a constant rate.
What is your case for God?
You seem really focused on us.
Well, the genetic code's pretty good. I mean, it's pretty optimized. So
the genetic code's pretty good, but it's not a case for any God. You have to make a case for God. You can't just say, when you say the genetic code's pretty good, you might as well be saying, look at the trees. What is your argument supported by evidence, verifiable, objectively verifiable evidence that confirms the existence of a God?
Well, it's not the same as a tree in that the genetic code, the way that I think how to put it. The way the code is like copied and everything, it's near optimal. It's not even that it's great.
Do you realize
it's almost perfect. Like
do
that
you
idea.
realize? Do you realize, Sid, that trees have the same genetics? They're DNA based too.
Well, yeah, but I'm not saying a tree is near perfect. I'm saying the replicating system in its DNA is near perfect, and the idea that would just happen.
Trees are made of DNA. Trees are made of DNA.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I'm saying is how is the code
Christ.
so optimal just by happenstance?
I still don't get how this is even an argument for God.
So even
if sorry.
I don't know that the code is optimal, but also it's not happenstance. And how is it that you're throwing out trees as not optimal, but keeping humans as optimal when they're both DNA based?
Well, because we get mutations and
so do trees. So do trees. So do trees.
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't. I agree. That's why I wouldn't say a tree is optimal, because it can get mutations in it or whatever.
So you're saying trees are not optimal. Which DNA is optimal?
The code in the DNA, like the way it copies.
Sid, listen to me. Mm-hmm. Sid, listen to me. The code and how it copies in a fucking tree is the same as it is in every other living thing on the planet.
Right.
So which DNA on the planet is not optimal and which DNA on the planet is optimal? And how do you know?
Well, I'm saying that the mechanism that it uses. Obviously, there's mutations and everything. That's not.
The
optimal.
mechanism is the same for trees that it is for us.
The same one that you thought causes genetic issues in the first place.
Sid, so I swear.
There's only 4.
Please stop saying yes, but you listen very carefully. Of all the DNA on the planet, which one is most optimal, and how do you know?
Well, I'm saying the actual language, like how there's only 4 letters or codes or whatever.
Sid, listen. Are you aware that the same letters, the same DNA exist for every living thing? So you can't look and say we're optimal and trees aren't.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
So
it should be trivially obvious.
They've done like computer simulations where they just randomly create different.
Sid, we're done.
Genetic.
Done. You don't have a case. You don't have an argument. You don't listen. You don't accept any criticism. You don't try to think about what was actually said. You just go on to the next thing. I'm tired of you going on to the next thing. I'm going to give you one last shot to make an evidence-based argument for God. Otherwise, I will consider this entire conversation about DNA a waste, because you know less than we do, and we don't know enough.
An argument from I guess prophecy in the Bible. I mean, within the Middle East, what's going on, and
wait, how do we get from genetics to generically the Bible and stuff that?
I asked for an objectively verifiable evidence-based argument, and Sid thinks that prophecy and what's happening in the Middle East proves God.
I mean, what's y'all's thoughts on fulfilled prophecy in the Bible?
Why do you
There is no prophecy that can be confirmed to be fulfilled that you can say is because there's a God.
Why every time that you're challenged, I go back and listen to the call. Every time that you've been challenged to like actually give an argument or give an inference or generate the conclusion, you just ask us a question on what we think. Almost every single time you've done that.
What do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about this?
What do you think about this? And like, what do I think? Here's what I think. Here's what I,
hold
on. Here's what I think. Let's say that you give a successful argument for the design thing that you were talking about earlier. So what? DNA was designed. I could conclude that aliens designed DNA. Like, I could do that, right? You still haven't gotten anywhere to God, even if I was that charitable. There's no reason for any of us to be this charitable. And then when asked for another argument, you reach in the back pocket as the Bible and what's going on, and you're using people's misfortunes as something that's evidence for Jesus. That's evidence for Jesus to you? It's like, hallelujah, our God is an awesome God. You think that calls for that?
Well, that's a good point, because there are atheistic geneticists that believe aliens come and randomly seed the genome, because otherwise the genetic entropy would take it all out. But then that just gives the question, well, who created the aliens? And you kind of have a
oh my God, you just missed the entire point. The point that I'm trying to stress to you is that there's nothing is followed from what you said to God. I could just have some other conclusion. That was the only reason I threw that in there. And then when you actually challenge it seems like you realize that you don't have any meat on the bones of the argument. You went to this prophecy in the Middle East. Okay, why should I?
Have you all heard of the thoughtful fallacy?
What?
It's a fallacious argument line of thinking called the thoughtful fallacy. It's where you appeal to coincidence despite enough evidence to the contrary.
I don't think that you're in any room to be lecturing or giving any analysis on a fallacy. Is that what we commit a formal fallacy or an informal fallacy? Do you even know the difference?
No.
Yeah, so then don't be the fallacy police.
Do you know the difference between validity and soundness?
No, sir, not off the top of my head.
Okay,
but
this will explain why you didn't have an argument.
Hang on. Do you believe there's a God?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yeah.
What God?
Yahweh.
Why do you believe that Yahweh is real? Why do you believe that Yahweh is real?
Well, I used to be an atheist a few years ago.
I didn't ask you what you used to be. I don't give a fuck whether you were an atheist. I only care if you were actually a skeptic, but you weren't because you don't know this stuff. I asked, why do you believe that Yahweh is real?
Because I think there's sufficient evidence of the resurrection.
What is the evidence for the resurrection? And if I were to tell you that I was 100% convinced that Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead, how does that prove God?
I mean, I would take what he said as truth. If he resurrected from the dead, I would kind of listen to him.
Is it impossible for someone to be resurrected from the dead and for them to not be divine?
Is it possible? Yeah, but that's not probable. Again, that's kind of appealing to coincidence.
Was Lazarus divine?
That's a good point. He didn't claim to be God, though.
It doesn't matter. You don't know that Jesus claimed to be God. You don't have a single word from Jesus that you can verify. You can't verify a single thing from his life or any eyewitness or anything. You have a bunch of stories, and you believe the stories.
I think it's safe to assume he was crucified for
hang on and
listen.
You can't prove the resurrection, but you're convinced there's evidence for it. I just granted you and said, for the sake of argument, I will say I 100% agree that Jesus rose from the dead. How does that prove that he was God?
How does that prove he was God? I mean, what would be the alternative?
That is a fallacy. Arguing that somebody does not have an alternate hypothesis does not mean that your hypothesis is right. You might as well be saying, we found a body. I think the Butler did it. Do you have a better idea? That's not how logic works. If Jesus rose from the dead, how does that prove that he was divine?
How does it prove he was divine? Well, I mean, I don't even go that. You know, I would say the blood of the martyrs is pretty convincing.
Sid, are you just trolling?
No, trolling is trying to get a reaction.
Then answer the question that I asked.
I don't want to
answer the question that I asked. If Jesus rose from the dead, how does that fact demonstrate that he was God?
Because it would validate the things that he said.
No. Is it possible for someone to say 2 true things and 4 false things?
When like the greatest moral teacher ever? Not really. I don't know why he'd lie.
I'm going to ask you this question one more time. Is it possible for someone to say 2 true things and 4 false things?
If they're a great moral person, it makes it more.
Oh my God! Just say yes or no.
I'll lean on the chance.
Sid,
just say yes or no.
Sid, you don't get to assume that he's the great fucking moral teacher. You're assuming the very thing you're trying to prove. Is it possible for someone to be a great moral teacher and claim they're God and be wrong?
Well, I'm not assuming he's a great moral teacher.
Is it possible, Sid, is it possible for someone to be a great moral teacher, claim they are God, and be wrong?
And rise from the dead? No, I don't see how that would be.
Oh my fucking God! You did it again.
Goodbye.
You did it again.
Goodbye, Sid. You are the most dishonest person I've had the displeasure of talking to today, because I asked very simple questions that lead to a conclusion, and every single time you want to add something else. You want to add something else that you think is circular. So here, let me ask you, is it possible for someone to say 2 true things, 4 false things, claim they are God, rise from the dead, and still not actually be God? Is that possible?
Yes, I'll grant it's possible, but
there you go.
Such a small
if
chance,
that's possible, stop talking. If that's possible, then Jesus rising from the dead, which you can't prove, but even if I granted it, Jesus rising from the dead would then not confirm that he was God, correct?
But I'd rather err on what's more probable than not probable.
I don't care how you'd err on. Goodbye, sir.
What's funny too is that there's in-house disputes on this with like preterists, postmillennialists. There's people that they dispute certain claims, whether Jesus called himself God, whether he didn't. So to me, it's insane in the sense that like this is already in-house dispute.
Yeah,
but whatever.
It's very frustrating because we're just trying to get to some understanding, and Sid was incapable. It was, what do you think? What do you think? What do you? No. So in Sid's case, I could grant that Jesus existed, which I don't have a problem with that, but that's nothing he can prove either. I can grant that Jesus was a great moral teacher. I can grant that he claimed to be God. All 3 of those things are disputed.
Mm-hmm.
I can grant that he rose from the dead. All 4 of those things are disputed. And even if I were to grant all 4 of them, that would not prove that Jesus was God. And yet Sid believes that Jesus was God. He believes 4 things that he can't prove. He thinks those 4 things confirm that Jesus was God, when even by his own mission, when led to it, Jesus could not be confirmed as God.
Yeah, if you got him to affirm all of those propositions, it wouldn't generate the conclusion. It wouldn't be a valid argument that therefore he is God, right? You could generate, you've already opened the door to absurdity at this point. I mean, aliens there could be once you've opened this door up to like supernatural entity can rise up for reasons, I don't think it's hard to like, hey, let's have some more candidate explanations since we've kind of opened the wacky world of explanations here. I'm happy to just say, some ET or something was just kind of fucking with people or had some motivation or whatever it is. But you put those propositions in a syllogism, it just doesn't generate the conclusion Yahweh exists or Jesus is God. But given that he didn't know the difference between validity and soundness or formal or informal arguments, I don't expect that to be digested.
this is why, in addition to skepticism, critical thinking, we definitely need to be teaching the basics of logic, because there are atheists who would be mad at me right now. Always atheists who are mad at me, but there would be atheists who would be mad at me right now for granting all of those things, for granting, Jesus existed, was a great moral teacher, claimed to be God, which and rose from the dead, all of which are disputed, none of which can be proven. And you can grant all four of them, and it still does not lead you to the conclusion, therefore Jesus was God. There's no syllogistic structure that is valid where you can plug those facts in and have the conclusion be, therefore God, therefore Jesus exists, or Jesus is God.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'd say soapbox on that, but that's actually one of the best things you can do, like a reductio or an internal critique. If what you can do, like, I don't know, if me and Matt are hanging out and I start talking about things that I believe, say I'm a naturalist or philosophical naturalist or whatever, and I start listing these propositions that I believe, and Matt goes, hold on, you believe A, B, and C? And he presents the syllogism to me and generates this conclusion out of things that I believe. That's extremely helpful to me, right? He took things that I accept, showed that something that you also believe doesn't follow from those things, or you actually hold to some contradiction in your view. And so that type of internal kind of critique, or getting me to accept those propositions, could be helpful for me to go back to the drawing board. So I think granting those things and giving them the toys to play with, so to speak, is actually immensely beneficial in these kind of conversations.
Well, we got more callers and more theists, and I'm going to let I've spoken to. We've got Chris, pronouns are he, him, in Idaho. I've spoken to Chris before, so I will let J Mike start off with Chris here. Chris, what do you got for us today? Evidence of a creator, I suspect.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just basically calling in, just more to bring something to you guys. Just to kind of get your opinion on it. So there's been documentation of, devils and demons that go way back before Christianity. Like
I'm hesitant to stop you
like
there,
Egyptian Bez. Go ahead.
Well, I'm hesitant to stop there just for something clarificatory. Are you saying it's like that's actually documented, or it's just people report it?
Well, I mean, if you, for an example, I believe it's the Egyptian, the Bez is one of the gods that was the evil god that was in opposition to whatever was good, and how they defined it.
Hold on, without all the kind of back stuff there, because I don't know that's going to be relevant. Like I don't know all that stuff. Is this just claims that people have, or are you saying that's actually documented? Because this is going to turn out just to be people claim these things, and it's just going to be really uninteresting. I just want to see if that's what this is going to be. If that's what you mean by documented.
Well, I think if you look into the Egyptian religions, you can actually confirm that. So, I mean,
confirm what? This is so vague to me. Confirm what? Hold on. Confirm what? Confirm what? That it actually happened, or confirm that people reported they thought that this was true? I'm not. That's what.
Well, that they thought it was true, but that's kind of my whole point. Is okay. They had a different view of something that was evil and malicious, and then Christianity comes along. They have the same thing. So what I'm trying to say is there's a repetitive, manifestation of these things coming through different religions, and that's kind of what I'm trying to bring to you.
Okay, who cares? So I'll just say I'll grant all of that. There's a common thread or certain propositions that a bunch of people have believed to be true, and it's like tangent to some religious belief. Great. Well, how does that? I don't understand. I don't. How does that?
You don't understand?
Because like a lot of people believe a lot of things today, and I think that it's pretty ridiculous that they believe those things. But the amount of those people or the longevity of those beliefs permeating like our history doesn't add any any weight to that proposition being true or false, from my view. Right? There's still some independent work that needs to be done.
Okay, but when these okay, let's say the example of the negative entity that's in their religion is basically correlates with whatever the next religion views that as. All I'm saying is maybe that is actual fact coming through to us, but we're just everybody's interpreting it in their own way.
How would you know?
How would I know?
Yeah.
How can you tell the difference?
I'm just saying the fact that there's if you're overlooking a lot of these religions and they're having the same narrative, I think that gives it that's a strong evidence that there could be something.
Right now, all I'm really hearing is like you feel ways about this, but like I'm not hearing like I don't like what's the independent like how could you confirm this, right, as opposed to any other alternative explanation?
Well, I think the way you can confirm it is you probably study different religions and look at kind of the relationship between how they're viewing a good.
But I'm granting all that. Hold on. Let me be clear. I'm granting all that. I'm granting we look at it, we see the common thread. That's fine. I'm not seeing how that's confirmation of how the claims are actually true, right? I mean, like the miracle of Fatima had 30,000 people report that they saw the sun move in the sky. They were wrong about that, right? Now that's not like totally analogous in the sense that you're looking at this like this commonality through like a longevity or through some series, and this is just one event with a lot of people, so not entirely analogous. But I don't see on either way we carve that up that if we had common reportings of people seeing the sun move from the sky, which I'm sure we probably do in history, that means that there was actually some raising of the probability that the sun actually moved in the sky. And in fact, we know that didn't occur because it would have detrimental effects that we could actually test, and we'd be able to confirm that, right? And so for you, presumably, there's got to be something. Hold on. Hold on, real quick. Presumably, in that case, that's something we could look at empirically. We could investigate and say, yeah, it's just not likely that story is true, given what we should expect upon the hypothesis that the sun moved from the sky. Now, in your case, all I'm asking is something that could confirm your explanation over others. And all you're giving me so far is the same thing that I would get reading the text and then coming up with a different hypothesis, right? Where me and you are using the exact same data, but I'm asking you to give me evidence to suggest that your analysis of it or your explanation that this common thread actually means something higher than us, that actually has any weight, as opposed to me reading something else into it, right? Because I can do that too.
I'm trying to figure out why you went to one rare event where the sun's moving. That doesn't even correlate.
I was trying to show you.
I'm saying
okay. I'm going to explain to you why it does. The reason it does is because in that story, we have a hypothesis that the sun moved from the sky, and I could have an explanation looking at these series of events and then go, okay, well, we should have an expectation upon this hypothesis. If it was the case that we had this event happening, we should be able to see something in the world that confirms this or disconfirms this or raises the probability of it being true. And in that case, we have empirical evidence of geology. We have all of these unification of scientific fields for us to go, yeah, reasonably, like extremely confident the sun will rise tomorrow, that did not occur. And that explanation better fits the data. People's just not understanding what was actually going on, the phenomena they were witnessing. I'm saying that is what I'm looking for you and your view. What was something that would falsify it or something that would make it so that all you're giving me so far is I read this thing and this is what I think. I can do the exact same thing. I can look at the data, come up with my own explanation. But so far, I've seen no independent reason for me to believe you.
You want concrete evidence and kind of what?
Yeah, I don't want to just sow story. Yeah, I don't want to just sow story. Is what I want.
Let me jump in for a second. Okay. He's not even just asking for concrete evidence. He's asking you how to distinguish between. So at some point, somebody had the first thought that there was an evil spirit, and they might be right, they might be wrong. And then more people later on had those same thoughts. How can we tell which, if any of them, were correct? What's the criteria or method to show whether or not these people were correct?
I think the method is, how do we determine that in today's world? And I would say that there's been instances of, in the case of the evil spirit, I would say, cases, and probably some of the audiences have had the same experience where they've had
Chris, pause.
like a sleep paralysis.
Chris,
Go ahead.
pause. If I rewound this from the point where I asked you what the method was until I interrupted you, there is not a complete sentence, not a cogent thought, nothing but babbling. You are literally babbling and saying nothing that is cogent yet. How can we tell which people were right about their evil spirits versus those ones that were wrong? What method can we use to identify which claims about evil spirits are right and which ones are wrong?
I don't think we can look at specific methods, but I think that we can kind of look at the general overarching view of it.
So we don't have a justification?
Isn't the general overarching position that human beings think things, and sometimes what human beings think is not correct?
I agree. I think it is. But I think when there's multiple reports of the same thing throughout history, I think that's something that maybe that should stop us and maybe hesitate, be like, okay, maybe there is some truth in this.
You'd like to think
maybe
that. You really
you know
would,
what I mean?
Chris, but I understand why you'd like to think that. But here's the thing. Let's imagine that 20,000 years ago, somebody suspected that something was caused by an evil spirit. And in the intervening 20,000 years, there have been many, many, many reports and positions and beliefs of people thinking something happened by an evil spirit. So now you have 20,000 years of people believing there's an evil spirit doing something. What's the likelihood that after 20,000 years, we would still have no method to detect, no method to confirm, and no objectively verifiable evidence to show that any of them were ever correct? What's the likelihood over 20,000 years that we would end up today with no more chance of telling who was correct than we did 10,000 years ago?
So the only explanation I have is basically that we're disbarred from an alternate reality. That would be really the only,
Goodbye.
And everybody's kind of getting,
God.
Okay.
That's so convenient for you, Chris, isn't it? It's so convenient that you can. I wish I had that for my views. Like, I wish I could do that.
No.
Say goodbye, Chris.
You're gonna hang up?
Say goodbye.
Yeah, you're really bad at presenting justification for your views.
Okay.
Okay. Don't say goodbye. Goodbye. All right. We really want people to bring their A game and their H game, which is the honest game, as I pointed out. We're willing to entertain all kinds of ideas, but if we're having a conversation about reality, you don't get to jump to some other reality. I thought about this while Mike was talking, and I really love, we may do this from now on because it keeps me from losing my mind and yelling at people. And also it makes me come up with ideas. That's the key. At some point, somebody thought that something was caused by an evil spirit. Now, we know from the history of religions that the earliest religions were spiritual, spiritism, animism, the notion that there was some sort of agency that was moving the bushes or whatever else. Mm-hmm. That when we died, there was a soul or spirit that left us, or that the spirits of our ancestors were out there doing things. These were the early religions. The fact that those ideas persisted and were independently arrived at, seemingly independently arrived at by different cultures, does not point to them being true, because the common thread across all of those is not truth, but humans. Humans trying to understand the world, considering possible or seemingly possible potential explanations. They're going to come up with similar explanations. It is wholly unremarkable that the notion of dead ancestors or spirits would pop up all over the place. What's not reasonable is that now, all of these thousands of years later, we would have no better evidence for this than we had at the beginning. And that the reports of these things, of the visions of these things, decline as our ability to record them visually increases. As we develop better and better tools to investigate these, one would think that if these claims were true, we would have more substantiated reports, but we have fewer.
Well,
And
it
if
reminds
your
me of Mitch.
explanation- I'm just saying, if your explanation for that is, well, alternate reality, then I don't need to talk to you.
Well, to quote Mitch, it's not that Bigfoot. It's not that we're getting all these blurry pictures. It's that Bigfoot is blurry. Yeah, that's the
Yes.
problem, man. UFOs,
He's in multiple
the
dimensions.
gods, they're just blurry figures. That's the problem.
I ask people quite a lot, here's what we want: objectively verifiable evidence and a method, a methodology, a test process, some mechanism that you can show how to tell the difference between if your claim is true and if it's not true. Essentially, if your claim's unfalsifiable, we're never going to be able to falsify it. We're never going to be able to disprove it. Neither is anybody else. And if you're believing something and you're going to keep believing it until somebody disproves it, you will keep believing an unfalsifiable claim forever. So
yeah, it's interesting too, because like what you bring up, I'll go on TikTok or whatever and debate theists and hear all these claims about, you know, something that happened to them when they were 6 or 7, or I hear it all the time. And the people that I run into, it's not always the case, but typically they don't have very like a good tool set. They can't typically justify the views or beliefs that they have. And that commonality that I see today, you know, in 2023 with like a science of medicine and all of these advances, me being able to do the show over the internet in my room, it doesn't make me feel good that common thread in humanity is pointing to something that's like, you know, real, or as opposed to just our dearth of knowledge creeps in a lot. It's the human condition. So
yeah. Also, if anybody actually hears this, we know that there's some issues with buffering on YouTube. I know Twitter was down. I don't know if there's something going on with the internet in general, or maybe if there's storms in the area, but I think everything here is good. I haven't seen any actual downtime, and I'm still getting chat, which means it's not coming from our house. But we got lots of callers and some theists. What's that?
Just I can tell people what's up though. So we're having a low bitrate issue, which also it is storming really intensely outside. So almost certainly has to do because of that. So I'm really sorry for the playback if you're getting any buffering. Although Jimmy was just watching because I asked him for help and he said that it wasn't buffering on his end. So I don't know what to say about that.
I got rain here too in Atlanta, so it could be bad for me. Well,
by the way, question for my lovely producer at the end of the hall: do we also record a local copy in case the stream gets nuked?
So we are considering working on that, which is part of the reason we got I got a brand new rig for production, although we don't do that currently. So it's probably something we should consider in the future, but as of right now, that's not how we operate.
Yep, probably should. Let's get to some calls and hopefully we won't drop anything. We have Dwayne in New Hampshire. Pruns are he a theist who I'm confused here. You say you believe there's a creator, but verification is next to impossible?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's all theory, right? Well, first of all, you got to get into the Bible. And if you're going to talk about the Bible, you have to understand that the Bible's a blueprint. It's not a religion.
I need to ask a question, Dwayne.
Huh?
Well, I need to ask a question. You said, first of all, you said theory, but this is not a theory. But you said, first of all, we need to get into the Bible. Why do we need to get into the Bible? Was the Bible, what is it about the Bible that means we have to pay attention to?
I think the first thing that you need to understand is that the Bible's not, how can I say? My opinion is religion's a construct, and it's a misunderstanding.
Dwayne?
Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah. You said first we had to deal with the Bible. Why do we have to deal with the Bible at all?
Well, because I think to understand the whole idea behind the God, you have to realize that the Bible's a story, and it's an allegory
Dwayne,
for the shamanic initiation.
Dwayne,
And
why do we
yeah,
have to deal with the Bible?
well, because I only go to the Bible because that's what everybody references. And
Do you believe?
and
Do you
the whole
believe?
thing
Do
is,
you believe? Do you believe in the God of the Bible?
I don't believe there is a God in the Bible. I believe
Then,
the references to God in the
Dwayne,
Bible.
you actually believe, and why you actually believe it. So, if you don't believe in a God that is based on the Bible, then the Bible is irrelevant. And the biggest, most important thing you can do is when either of us asks you a question, think about the question that was asked and answer that question. Don't just go on to whatever your next point was or whatever else. Answer the question that was asked. So, you believe in a creator God. I'd like for you to explain to Mike and myself what this creator God is and why you believe in it.
Hello?
Hello? Yes. What is this creator God you believe in and why?
Okay, I believe the creator God is a shamanic happening. Okay, they call it a shamanic initiation.
I don't know what that is. Is that like doing
Okay,
ayahuasca
so
or
it's not
something?
really. Have you ever heard of a shamanic initiation? It's what
I
Alan
assume that's like
Watt, Carl Jung, all these great philosophers. It's what they tried to
well,
explain
yeah, I
throughout.
would hold on there. I wouldn't call them good philosophers or philosophers, but go ahead.
So hang on.
Well, I
I
mean,
think
McKenna.
no.
I
Hang on.
mean,
Listen, Dwayne. Listen, Dwayne.
whoever you want to
Listen,
cite,
Dwayne.
Socrates,
Dwayne.
Plato.
Listen, Dwayne. A shamanic initiation is something that a human being goes through to become a shaman, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Then the initiation is not a creator God. What is the creator God that you believe in and why?
Well, that's why. How do people go through this if there isn't a creator God?
Dwayne, if the reason you believe in the creator God is because you've gone through shamanic initiation, that's cool. But the first fucking question was tell me what the God is and then why. And you said you believe the God is shamanic initiation. That's how you think you find the God. What is the God? Start with the
Well,
noun and then we'll get to the fucking
okay,
verb.
I'll answer that, Matt. I don't believe that anybody can really put into words what the creator or what people call the G with a capital G God.
So we don't
believe
even know
it's
what
really
it is you're talking
explainable.
about. Then how do I even know if the statement is could even be true or false? How do I not know it's just equivalent to like if it can't even be true or false?
You can't say you believe in something that you cannot conceptualize. That's a
Well,
contradiction. It is impossible
so,
to believe something that you cannot conceptualize.
It has
well,
to, you have to when you believe real quick, Dwayne,
okay,
real quick. When you believe something, the way that I take belief is you have an attitude towards like a proposition, like it's raining at both of our locations. And so me and Matt both believe that to be true. That's our attitude towards that. It has to be something that could be true in order to have a belief. It's not even clear that the thing you're stating could even be believed.
well, the thing is I studied religions around the world, and if you study religions around the world, you come to find that every single religious story is pretty much the same story with different
God, are we having
characters'
this again?
names.
Are we having this again? Are we doing this again? Okay, we got through this with the last caller. There's a common thread. Humans are gullible. I've met a lot of them. I talk to them every day. People are gullible and they can't justify their views. There's nothing spectacular about that to me, like at all.
Not
The
only
fact that people can't justify their views is not like that. It's more of a frustrating thing than it is like, wow, how amazing is that?
While Dwayne was on hold, I literally just explained that the common thread among people coming to conclusions about the supernatural is people. The psychology of people. That is the best explanation for why people come up with the same sorts of things. I've studied world religions as well, Dwayne, but your case is, if you study world religions, you find a common story. No, you don't. You find some common themes. Just like if you study a bunch of science and a bunch of pseudoscience about the same subject, you will find common themes. If we're trying to figure out a model of intelligence, you will find common themes. But in the pseudoscience, you will find a bunch of nonsense that you cannot justify and that is ultimately disproved by actual science. So now, for the last time, Dwayne, can you describe the God that you believe in? Because if you can't, I'm ending the call. Goodbye. You got to give us something to work with. You can't, like, here, Mike, just for fun. Hi, Mike. I believe in a God that I can't describe. What do you think of that?
So well, it's not clear to me you could even believe X to be true. It doesn't even clear to me.
But I do. Are you
like,
calling me a liar?
I just think you're like conceptually impoverished.
You're just not name calling. I just told you I believe in a God. Can you disprove my God? It's hilarious.
It's the same thing that I get on TikTok every day, where I'll talk to people about this, and it's like, yeah, but you can't disprove that. And it's like, if you're just giving up on the project, just let me know. Right? If that's just all you're telling me is you're giving up on the project, I'll just take that as the debate. I mean,
this will be straightforward and easy. We have another theist caller, Matt in Indiana. Pronouns are he, him, has a question which I am eager to get to. So, Matt, welcome to the show. How can we help?
Awesome. Hey, thanks for taking my call, Matt. Appreciate you.
You got a great name.
I want to kind of start more foundational because I think jumping too far ahead just it gets us in the wash. I won't jump and assume any kind of quick conclusions. And I can go fast. And I just kind of hope that we don't oversimplify each other's.
Yep. Start with your question.
Arguments.
Let's do it.
But I want to start out with: can science account for all truth?
I have no idea, but I will say this about science. Science does not make proclamations of truth, nor does science make proclamations of certainty. Science tries to come up with the best models that are the most accurate. So science doesn't make claims of truth. It just makes tentative models that are the best explanation consistent with the current evidence.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I would say that mathematics probably is somewhat of an exception to that. I think mathematics would make claims to truth. That's probably the best, most pure
math
form
is not
of science we have. Correct.
So math is not science. Mathematics is deductively derived from the foundations of logic. Identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, the set theory, things like that. They are all deductive processes. Science is an inductive process.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. For sure. No doubt about that. And would you agree that with kind of a characterization that science is a reverse engineering of our physical world? And I'm just trying to simplify it, right?
Yeah, no,
is that a fine characteristic as far as a whole? I won't try to nail you to it, but just kind of an overall explanation as far as what science does to explain our natural world.
I think there's two prongs to science. One of them is an attempt to understand the world, and of course that could easily be described as an attempt to reverse engineer the world. And then there's what we do with that scientific information to potentially adjust or create things in the natural world, like we'll create, whatever Coca-Cola, whatever the chemical formula is for Coca-Cola, that probably wasn't going to occur naturally on its own, but we used our understanding of science to do something. And that also counts as science because you can learn additional things about the world from that.
I would just add,
agree there. Okay.
I would just add, Matt, I would just add real quick that, because I agree with you, but a big part of that for me is the production of like new predictions or novel predictions, things that we don't know in the future, right? That are
Sure.
gonna
Yeah, that's
confirm the model. So,
that's a perfect that's a perfect segue. So
Cool.
so I'm going to make this statement because we got to get into the God question, right? So here's my statement, and I'm curious to kind of listen to your answer. And this is not a quick one statement to get to the end. We got a ways to go before we get to the end.
I don't need a preamble for all of it.
uh,
We're doing great, Matt. Just get to it.
Okay, sure. So let's make an assumption that God did create our world. How do you believe that science would at least attempt to account for that truth?
I don't have any idea because we haven't established any of the characteristics or quality of this God. To me, if this God is able to remain hidden, if this God does not manifest in a detectable way, then it would be prevented. Science would be prevented from discovering that. And if this God intentionally did not interact with reality in a detectable way, then science would have no hope of confirming its existence.
Correct. And I agree with you there. I don't think science would ever be able to confirm that there is a God. That's not its job, right? That's not its job.
Now, see, now
but
you've gone from agreeing to disagreeing, because now you're declaring what science couldn't do when we haven't even established whether or not there is a God that is hiding or whatever. What if there's a God that created the world?
That's down the road. We're not ready for that yet. We're not ready for that yet. We'll get there.
What if I finish my fucking sentence? What if there's a God that created the world and he does allow for science to detect him?
Maybe. If that's the case,
saying,
then I'm not sure what that would look like. I don't know. I'm not sure how science would detect God. I guess that's what I was kind of asking. If you would think science would ever be able to say there is a God and there was a supernatural creation.
Matt ruled out that possibility. All I'm trying to do is clarify that.
Ruled out what? Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I don't think it's not science's job to say this supernatural thing happened. Is that wrong? Do you feel like that's wrong?
Stop. Science currently has no way to confirm anything supernatural, but that's not the fault of science. If there was something supernatural and it was able to interact with the natural world in a detectable way, then science would be able to explore that detection.
Be able to explore that detection. Okay.
If it manifests in reality, that manifestation is subject to confirmation by science.
I understand.
Yeah, and Matt,
I understand what you're saying.
I might need more from you.
I think you're saying it's possible for God to be supernatural and yet interact with us in ways that could be measurable.
I don't know whether God is necessarily supernatural or not.
Okay.
Even in the God that you create, where you said God created the universe, I don't know that God is necessarily supernatural or not. Whether or not it's detectable, we don't know. You're the one that asserted you're the one that asserted that we can't detect it and that science couldn't detect it, and I'm saying you don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm
so let me go a little
Matt, real quick before you start. Yeah, I'm also a little weird because you just state out like a proposition like, let's just assume God exists. There's so much to unpack there. I think maybe Matt's more willing to grant that than me, but if we just go with this or some bear designer, hold on. Jesus, you have a problem with this, Matt. Jesus. So it's not clear to me that when you make that statement, because and we're going to talk about with science, it's not clear to me that this is a falsifiable hypothesis, in that I think I could make any prediction or I could have any set of observations, and that's consistent with the God hypothesis. No world, a world with just rocks in it, a world with just I'm a little more skeptical of going forward on this, because I don't know that this hypothesis, I don't know that there's anything you couldn't look in the world and go, oh, well, what explains why that thing exists? Something desired that thing to exist, had the ability to produce it, and has no reasons not to produce it, right? Voila, you explain literally anything that you want with that type of hypothesis. So if I'm assuming that from the get-go, then I don't even know that it's falsifiable. So you might have to unpack what you even mean by assume God exists, because people don't mean the same thing by that 3-letter word. The way that I take it is you mean a mind that exists alone that creates like the external world or something like that.
The last thing that
Yeah,
there
I think
was
that's
something
consistent with any
supernatural, and it doesn't
observation
matter
that you
what
can
it
ever
is.
make.
I'm just saying a supernatural thing created the universe. I'm trying to keep it as small as I can.
Well, that's
Yeah.
not. See, now we are not where we started, because all that you said at the beginning was that let's assume there's a God that created our world. That doesn't tell you anything about the ontology of God, whether it's supernatural or not. And now you're saying, oh, well, let's just
No,
ignore whether or not it's
correct.
God and just say, and well, God damn it. And now you're saying, let's ignore whether or
The
not it's
reason,
God and just say there's a supernatural cause of the world, which is a wholly different thing to
no,
accept.
no. What I was trying to do is try to figure out whether you felt like science could account for a supernatural creation. I don't want you to assume that there's a God. It's not like that. That's the pretense to any of the argument. I'm just trying to
It
get
doesn't
your
sound
idea or
falsifiable.
your concept or where you're working from as far as the limitations of science being able to account or point or confirm a God.
Can I just ask, is the hypothesis... Sorry, go ahead.
Right now, science has no way to confirm anything supernatural, and there is no way to confirm anything supernatural. There's been no confirmation of anything supernatural, or that anything supernatural is possible, or that anything supernatural can interact with reality in the entire history of the world. But that doesn't tell you whether or not science, hypothetically, in principle, can confirm the supernatural. What we don't have is any method to test or verify or inspect anything that is purported to be supernatural. That could change tomorrow.
I agree with you. Let's move on, because I'll get to my next point. I think maybe it'll make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, but Matt, this will help me. This will help me a lot. Does this make any does this hypothesis, the God hypothesis, make any novel prediction at all?
We don't need it anymore. We can move on.
I'm asking you. I'm asking you if it makes predictions, because if it doesn't, right, then it's not going to be something that I think is going to be in the realm of scientific inquiry.
This isn't Mike. All he wanted was for me to say that science can't currently confirm the supernatural. Has nothing to do with the God or anything else. He just tried to do baby steps in kindergarten fashion to get us there, instead of just saying, can science currently confirm the supernatural? The answer is no. Next.
Perfect. Okay. So in mathematics, there's proof, where you're going to prove something directly, and then there's also indirect proof. So if I have a binary or a trinary, like if I have A, B, and C, and I can't maybe directly prove that C is true, but if those three conditions are the only conditions, A, B, and C, I can prove that if A doesn't happen, or A can't happen, and B can't happen, that will prove that C can happen. That makes sense? If it's in a closed system where there's only three possibilities, that's indirect proof in math. Correct?
Yes, that's not math. It's just logic. If you know for certain,
for sure.
If you know for certain, there are. Can I finish a fucking sentence? If you know for certain that there are only three possible outcomes, and you are able to rule out two of them, then the third one must be correct. Just like on this die that can roll 20 numbers, if I roll it and I can't see what number is up because somebody's put their finger on it, but I can look at every other number on here and rule them out, I'll know what that one is. This is not, I can't even believe we're wasting time on simple fucking concepts like this.
Well, I think for it's framing this for the audience. So let me jump right to it. Let me jump right to it.
Get to the fucking point.
So, I will. Okay. So looking at how the universe was created, where we have all of the matter in the universe coming from absolutely nothing. That's observable, right? We've observed that. We can do that.
No.
You're off the rails.
You don't get to say that the universe was created, and you don't get to say that matter came from nothing. Neither of those are observed.
Wait a second. So you've got the red shift,
Cre-
right?
created
We saw that
assume
all
hold on,
the
created
matter in the
assumes a
universe.
right? Like that's the reason we're stopping you. Creation assumes
Don't
a
worry about the
creator,
word
right?
created. Something else.
Okay,
Use
that's fine.
another word.
It's
That's
your
fine.
word.
That's fine.
Derive,
You
but
that's fine.
also
Use your words carefully.
you
Not our
also
problem.
Okay,
said
sure.
that
That's fine.
you also stop. You also said that it's observed that matter must have come from nothing. No, it hasn't been observed. That's not a fact.
In fact, it's question begging against the view that I'm most sympathetic towards. So I'm never going to accept that. It's give me reason.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so give me how you think the matter of the universe came to be.
No,
If you want to me on this,
I'll
then you're
let
just
Mike do it.
dodging.
I'll let Mike do
I
it, but
can't-
now you're just wasting my time.
Yeah, I can't. Like I can.
How is it wasting
Look,
time?
I'm going to
hold on.
explain
We
how
can do
it's
this
wasting
in
my
2 seconds,
time. I'm
and
going to
then
mute you, and Mike's going to give you an answer, and then I'm going to tell you how it's wasting my time and how you're not doing it anymore. Go ahead, Mike.
So I'll just make this really quick. There are views held by like people like Graham Oppie, for example, where there's an initial state of the universe, t equals 0, the singularity. It doesn't come from anything. It doesn't come from God. It's just a natural initial state of the universe. Has a beginning, has no cause. That's an alternative view. I'm just stressing that's a view that you'd have to compete with. Just declaring in mid conversation that comes from nothing would just beg the question against two types of views here. One where somebody thinks that the initial state is necessary, has to exist, but has no cause. Or two, somebody who thinks that it's just an infinite regression of past events. And so you just totally beg the question against both those views. The first thing I get, you use language incorrectly, but Matt, yeah, if you want to, just wanted to give you the alternative views that you have here.
Oh, so real quickly, you're a theist. You believe in a creator. We've now spent 13 minutes to establish two things that could have been done in two simple questions. One, can science confirm the supernatural currently? No. Two, can you logically, if you know all possible causes, can you logically, after ruling out all other causes, conclude that the final option is true? Yes. Boom. We didn't need 13 minutes for that. Then you made assertions about matter having to come from nothing, which, as Mike pointed out, is not only not observed as a fact, but is not the only option. And then when we pointed this out, you then asked for me to explain where I think matter came from. And this is a waste of my fucking time because you're the one that believes you have an explanation for the origin of the universe. I don't. And I don't need one. And no matter what my explanation is, it doesn't have any impact on whether or not your argument that you are kindergarten-like crawling towards actually makes any sense. So I'm going to unmute you. You can address Mike, but stop wasting my time and present the case for the shit you actually believe. Welcome back, Matt.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Matt. Okay, so I'll go real fast. So I think that science, this is my belief, I believe that science can point to the supernatural, but will never say that the supernatural happened. I think that there is, depending on what your theories are at the origins of the universe, that was laid out correctly. But I think you have to look at, are those origins of the universe consistent with the laws of science? And if they're not, we've reached a contradiction.
They
It's
are.
not that
Hold on, no,
it's just
no, hold on,
we
no,
don't
stop,
know
stop,
it
stop,
yet.
stop, stop. No, that's
It's a
not a contradiction. What do you?
contradiction.
Hold on. What do you take? Okay, what do you take what's the form of a contradiction? What do you take a contradiction to be?
Great question. Okay, so let's go back to math.
No,
'cause
I,
it's
all,
pure, it's
no,
simple.
no. Look, I can say it to you
I'll go
in
fast.
literally like 3 words, right? 3 words. I can give you the form of it. That's it. Do you know it? Because I
Okay,
know
sure.
it. Yeah, it's a proposition and it's negation, right? It is raining
Right.
and it is not raining. There is no contradiction in the view that I gave you,
Not
or if
true.
it disagreed, even if it's something was
Oh,
disagreed with
okay.
science, that's an inductive assessment, or that's some model that's failing to like report reality back to us, right? That's not a contradiction. That's just being incorrect about something, right? That's not, there's nothing,
No.
or not having good reason to believe
let
it.
me
It's not a
explain.
contradiction. But two, how did you rule out my view? That there's an initial state
I
of
can
the
rule out your
universe.
view.
Right? Okay, well, so then you can't rule out the view.
No. So
Wasn't your whole
here's
thing
the
about
difference. If I work
unremaining
a math problem out, if I work a simple algebraic linear equation out and I get x equals 3, that's the
I don't
solution.
know why you
Maybe
why
at
do
the
you
beginning I didn't know how to
Matt,
do it,
Matt,
but
Matt,
that's a
Matt,
solution.
why
If I work
do
the
you
problem,
not directly
Okay, Matt's
respond to the
muted.
people?
Matt's muted.
Why do you not just
We don't need you to tell us what happens when you work out an equation for x equals 3. We need you to start acknowledging what we're actually saying. Mike's asking you how you ruled out his model, but also you have a very flawed understanding of what you said. I took notes. You've reached the conclusion that science can never confirm the supernatural. You have no justification for this, which means you are already willing to assert a position that you cannot defend and will never, maybe by your own position, you'll never be able to confirm it. You're saying science will never be able to confirm the supernatural, and you have no justification for that. But then you said, depending on what your theories are they consistent with the laws of science? No, sir. When we're talking about the origin of the universe, science is barred currently from investigating the beginning beyond the Planck time. So we don't know what the science is at t equals 0. We definitely don't know what the science is for potential t equals negative something, or in a multiversal thing, or anything like that. Science can't investigate currently beyond the Planck time. So your model, which is a model of origins consistent with the laws of science, is not something you can even put together because you don't know what the laws of science are at t equals 0. So you have an absolutely flawed foundation and a flawed understanding of science, where you are willing to assert what science will never be able to do, which you can't demonstrate, while simultaneously asserting what should and shouldn't be considered valid or consistent with science when there is no science at t equals 0. Welcome back.
right? Well, I think it's tough to do it in a short amount of time, which we
I
have.
know it's tough for you
What
to
I was
do
saying
anything in a short
otherwise,
amount of time, because it's been 20 minutes to establish nothing.
okay, I understand. There's two ways to be. There might be a problem, like if I have a problem, a math problem, I might not know how to solve it yet, but eventually I can come to the answer, and I get an answer.
I
Like
don't
I
believe
said,
that.
x
No, sir.
equals 2.
How do you know?
And there are some problems
All
where I
right,
reach
I'm muting you again. I'm muting you again. Are
back.
there currently unsolved math problems? And is it possible that those math problems will remain unsolved forever? That's a simple question. Are there currently unsolved math
There,
problems? And is it possible they will remain unsolved forever?
yes, there are, and there are also
Then how
math
can you
problems where
assert?
contradiction
Then
has
how
been
can you
reached, where there
assert?
will never be
And
a
how can
solution.
you assert? How can you assert that when given a math problem, you will eventually solve it? That's false.
Are there math problems now that will? There are math problems right now that there exist that we don't know the answers to, but someday mathematicians will figure it out. There are
No,
also
I just
some.
asked you, Matt. I just asked you. I'm going to do it again. Are there math problems that may be impossible to solve forever?
Yes.
Then you cannot
Yes.
assert, if that is the case, then you cannot claim that what you just claimed. You just claimed that if you were given a math problem, eventually to solve it. And then you also claimed that all math problems will eventually be solved by mathematicians. And now you're
No, I never
acknowledging.
said that. No, now
You
you're putting words
fucking
in my
did,
mouth.
Matt.
I can
You
raise my
did.
voice
You
too.
did.
I can raise my
Matt,
voice
you
too.
did.
I never
Matt,
said that
go
all
back and
math
listen.
problems will
Matt,
be
go
solved.
back. Matt,
Mute.
go back and listen.
Boom.
And it was ironic because you talked about contradictions, and then you actually did one. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a fucking knife.
Chat is
Come
laughing
on.
at you. Rewind and stop telling me what pretending to tell me what you didn't say when we all fucking heard you. Maybe you misspoke, but you definitely said that there are math problems that are unsolved today, which will definitely be solved by mathematicians in the future.
Yes. Yes. But that's not saying all math problems will be solved in the future.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I think
Are there
I
some
think
math problems that can't be solved
we should probably
today
just let Matt
because we
stew
don't
on
know how to
this.
do it, but will be solved in the future? Yes, it happens all the
You
time.
don't know that
But there are
either.
some.
Jesus fucking Christ. All right, I'm going to mute you again. Listen, Matt, this is really easy. It may be the case that a currently unsolved math problem will never be solved. It may also be the case that all unsolved math problems might eventually be solved. We don't know, which means you can't assert for any given math problem or all given math problems whether or not they will be solved. And yet your position was, if you were presented with a math problem, you'd eventually solve it, and that math problems would eventually be solved. This is what you were asserting. It's just like when you said science will never confirm the supernatural. You are fond of repeatedly asserting the impossibility of things or the inevitability of things that you cannot demonstrate. Please stop doing that. You're looking incredibly foolish. You're laughing?
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Because like
Nope.
when I don't think like a lot of people don't really realize when you say terms like can't happen, never can happen, you're giving like an expression on possibility or impossibility, right? And that, like, if I say that can't happen, someone goes, "Oh, why can't it happen?" I was like, "Oh, well, I can't draw a squared circle because it's just like a contradiction, like in terms and logic. Like I just can't do it." That would be something to substantiate your case. But when he says never, it's not like it's violating some law of nature or axiom of classical logic. There's no like substance to the never in any sense. But I love when people use those kind of expressions like can't and then never can tell you in virtue of what it's not possible.
All right. I just had to send a quick note to the producer because we got more calls I'm actually going to be able to get to. Let's see if we can do this. Nathan.
I like.
Pronouns are he, him. Nathan wants to claim that it's okay to have an irrational belief.
Hello?
You're on.
Hey,
hey.
can I start? Could I actually start this? Could I just ask you a question, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Any one of you answer this. I believe that a square or a triangle is three sides enclosed on a plane, and a circle is not three sides enclosed on a plane. And I really desire both of you to draw those for me. I know that you can't do it, but I really desire that you do it. Is that a rational belief a good thing to have?
Are you asking me or are you asking Matt?
I'm asking you.
Okay. I mean,
Is that an okay
I
thing
wouldn't
for me to
necessarily
believe?
say it's bad or good. What was that? Sorry, it's cutting in and out. I can't really.
I'm just asking it. It says on the call screen that you think that it's okay to have those. So I just presented something that was irrational that I believe. Is that okay?
Well, I don't
To
think,
be fair,
I don't think all irrational thoughts are.
yeah, I was going to say, to be
equal,
fair, it
you know?
doesn't say he's okay with all irrational beliefs. So here's the question, Nathan. Which irrational beliefs? Give me an example of an irrational belief that it's okay to have.
That's precisely what I want to do. Is where do you demarcate?
I'd market it as a course that's like of a truth that we do not know yet. That's just kind of out there, you know. So if I happen to believe that there is a heaven that I'll go to after I die, you know, it might provide me comfort. It's not really harmful to anything I do in this life. But
Really?
if I wanted to believe that, I think that'd be okay.
Okay. So right now, let's say you think that when you die, you're going to go to heaven. Does that have no impact on how you treat people?
I guess it does, sort of.
Okay.
Oh man.
So you just acknowledged that you have this irrational belief that you don't think impacts anything, and now you're saying that it does impact how you treat people. Isn't how you treat people important?
Yes, I would say so.
So then it does matter whether or not you have that irrational belief. So maybe give me another irrational belief that you think it's okay to have. Because that one ain't
well,
one.
I guess maybe I could add on to that because
my idea of heaven is that if you do good things, then you'd get into heaven. But I guess I didn't really clarify that. But
what if
I think
it all. Okay, let me stop. So now you're saying that the irrational belief is that if you do good things, you get into heaven. What if it turns out there is a heaven, and instead of getting in by doing good things, you get in by believing in Jesus? Won't that result in your eternal damnation?
I guess. I mean,
so now we've come up with your second example of an irrational belief that you think is okay to have, and neither of them is it okay to have. Here we go. That's 2 strikes. This one I'm just going to stay out of. Give us your potential strike 3. What's a third irrational belief that you think it's okay to have?
Okay. If someone told me the truth of my life that I was going to die, say 1 year, and I have 1 year until I die, I have an irrational belief that I'll be able to do everything that I want with my life in this moment, and that this whole year is going to be the best year, potentially be the best year of my life, and that'll help me, try to live my life throughout this year. I think that'd be okay, a rational belief to have. There's no proof that'll happen, and depending on reality and my situation, it might not be completely rational to think that, but.
Mike, you want
So
this one?
you're saying, yeah, I'm not
sure. It's okay to hold the rational belief that with 1 year left to live, it's going to be the best year of his life.
Well, I'll try to make it the best year of his life. It's kind of in accordance with hope, I guess you could say.
We're not objecting to hope.
I'm still not saying how this wouldn't still negatively impact people around you or have some cascading effect. How does that protect you? How does that from having the same kind of issues that we've pointed out?
It's like, psychologically, it can affect you. If you have hope, and maybe it's irrational, that's true, but it helps you, comfort you, and helps you move forward in life. I think an irrational thought like that can be beneficial. I don't think all irrational thoughts are equally bad, and I don't think being too rational is also good. I think it's got to be kind of like a balance between the two.
You think that there needs to be a balance between the rational and the irrational?
Well, maybe not so much as a balance, but it can't just be completely one side over the other.
Why? What's wrong with being completely, what is worse by being completely rational?
Yeah.
Well, I think when you go too rational, I guess it depends on what kind of reality that you live in. In this reality, if you're too rational, a lot of stuff about life, it's good, but it's also very shitty depending on where you are. If I was born in a country
I asked a very specific question. You don't get to paint it as too. What is wrong with being completely rational? Show me one bad thing that necessarily occurs because someone is completely rational. That's what I thought. You can have hope.
Yeah.
You can have hope that is rational. Rational doesn't mean absolute and true. It means that you have good reason. It's entirely possible to get a death sentence and say that you're going to die in a year, and to say, you know what? I want to make this the best year of my life. There's nothing necessarily irrational about that. It may be that the most rational action that you can take is to try to make this life the best it can be for that last year, because failing to try will make it worse. That's not irrational. If you live your life in a way that is consistent with the evidence, you can still have mountains of hope, because hope is provided by evidence. If you've got a cancer diagnosis, I know somebody that's probably going to die, and it's not good at all. I'm not going to get after him if he has some irrational belief, but I still believe those irrational beliefs are harmful. And you can still have rational hope based on the actual science and the actual evidence.
Well, yeah. In this case, hello?
You're here.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just going to say I misunderstood your example. I thought you were saying someone lying to you about having only a year left. Not it actually being the case. Sorry, but yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
Well, I would say, I mean, yeah, you could have hope based on evidence and scientific evidence, I guess. But when I look past this, I mean, what if there's no evidence for it? What if there's like there's no way to measure if it's like actually going to happen, or there's no past experience that you can actually measure it with? It's just
Wouldn't
something
you
that you're just hoping to be true, and it may be irrational, but it comforts you. It eases your mind, and maybe it's not necessarily true, but I mean, then again, there is no truth that can be demonstratable about anything. So perhaps I need to make my own truth for me to get through this life.
Hey, what if heroin eases your mind?
I mean, I think that's a little different, but
I don't.
that
Your argument is if it eases your mind, that's good. But what if so for example, if I've got 6 months to a year to live, if I act as if I'm going to live the whole year and it turns out I only live 6 months, maybe I've made a big mistake. Maybe if I act as if I'm only going to live 6 months, that lets me put my affairs in order and get things taken care of right away so that the next 6 months become a bonus. If I'm living my life in accordance with the best evidence, how can that be a mistake?
I mean, in that case, I wouldn't.
And there's nothing,
I
that's
just
rational. To live your life in accordance with the best evidence would be rational.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I don't think I think I can still have like one irrational belief and live my life completely rational. I don't think just because I have an irrational belief
Nathan,
that every decision
Nathan,
I make is irrational.
Nathan,
Yes.
which irrational belief are you so desperate to cling to that you're going to sit here and rationalize?
That was what I wanted to say. There
It's
has to be
so
something beyond
obvious.
that.
You have some personal irrational belief that you don't want somebody to criticize. You desperately want to hang on to your gree. What is it?
Yeah, okay, I'm definitely hanging on to it. It's I'm hanging on to this idea of God and heaven. I've been kind of struggling to hold on to it. It's been kind of fluctuating, but I don't know. I'm definitely just.
Do you think it's a
It's definitely
bad sign if you're calling in though on the belief on a general outlook, trying to have this, okay, well, if I can, so long as I can show that it's okay to have this irrational belief, I can maintain it? Or do you not see how I'd be really worried if I was doing that with my beliefs or calling in and then trying to justify that on the outside, as opposed to internally trying to see, do I have good support, good justification for this belief?
Well,
I
I
mean,
was
we had a call.
calling in because
You and I spoke a week ago where you tried to say that belief is rational even if there's no evidence. And now you're calling in saying that it's okay to have an irrational belief. Look, if you are comforted by the God concept, I get that. I genuinely do. But I think you're only comforted because you're being very selective. For example, which God concept should you be engaged with? Which heaven should you be seeking? Which hell should you be avoiding? Which version of a particular God is the right one? Because if you live your life desperately clinging to the wrong one because it's comforting, then even if there is a God and I'm also wrong, you might be in worse shape than me.
I guess. I mean,
I'm never, ever, ever going to find myself standing in front of the God having to explain why I believed in some other God.
yeah, because you lack any belief in anything without evidence. So there's no reason to believe that. And I guess my answer to that's kind of ironic because I do agree with that. I have no reason to fear that because there's no evidence pertaining to that. So I don't know.
If all you're
I'm
looking
just
for is somebody to say, you're not the worst ever for believing in God, I'll tell you. There's plenty of great people who believe in God. They don't have a good reason. It just makes them feel good. And it's the same reason that some people like to So, for example, weed is probably going to be legal everywhere in the United States in the near future. It's not legal in my state, or at least not very legal, but there's Delta 8 and it's legal pretty much everywhere. And so I have diabetic neuropathy and I have problems sleeping. And so I have a little Delta 8 vape. And on many nights, I will hit that vape before bedtime. And Art, I tell you, it puts me out like a light. But do I actually need it as many nights as I hit it? No, I don't. But I will rationalize it because I feel good. And
I'll
so
rationalize it with you.
I will spend some nights high just because it feels good. But if I stop doing that, maybe those nights would be better spent having better conversations with Arden instead of staring at my phone until I fall asleep. Maybe those nights would be better spent doing something other than being a lump on the couch. Those are things I think of. And I don't think I'm the worst person ever for being high slightly more often than I probably should be. And I don't think you're the worst person ever for believing in a God while you sit around acknowledging that you don't have a good reason and you might actually be believing in the wrong one. If you're looking for a secular blessing, congratulations, you have one. On the other hand, you could also give up that God belief and maybe find out that you're much better off across the board.
Maybe. Yeah.
A lot of us feel better.
I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes
I got to
think
move
better
on,
to
Nathan.
focus on present life.
Get some more thought. We'll talk to you another time.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep. Cheers, man.
I was gonna say, you have just give you all the rationality, and I'm irrational in some beliefs. Which do you prefer? But I mean, obviously, how could you not prefer this hobo on the street asking you for change? So I didn't want to put him in that predicament. Make you feel bad, Matt?
It's wild because people think that, as he did a little bit, they think that if they give up the what they think is the source of their hope, that they'll stop having hope. I have all kinds of hope. I don't believe in a God. Once upon a time I did. And I would have said that that God is not only the creator and sustainer of the universe, but is the source of my joy, the source of my hope, the source of my confidence, the source of my salvation. And I don't have salvation now, but I have hope and I have joy and I have confidence. And I have them, I don't care if you believe me or not, more abundantly than I did when I was a Christian. The Bible says that I've come so that you might have joy and have it more abundantly. I have it more abundantly now. I know people are, oh, Matt's angry all the time. No, you're seeing me on calls with people who are dishonest or unwilling to grasp reason. I'm happy. I'm not delirious. I got problems left and right. It's just that now when I have problems, it's not Satan attacking me. It's people or me being stupid. I've been monumentally stupid on all kinds of things. But my life is good. And my life is good in part because of the people who show up here on Wednesdays. So thanks. We got two more calls to get to before
and it's grounded in
Mike, you wanted to
something.
add something? Yeah.
Oh no, I was saying, and it's grounded in something, and that's a way when you put those two side by side, there's something that sticks out pretty clear.
I don't want false hope. I don't want delusional joy. I want reality.
Exactly.
All right, we've got anonymous with anonymous pronouns from the USA who's a theist. So,
I was hoping the presuppositionalists wouldn't have dipped. They called and left very quickly.
Yeah. Anonymous, you're live.
Hello?
Hello, you're live.
Hello?
Hi.
Mind.
Awesome.
Nope.
Still
I'm not
don't even
playing the
understand
hello
what that
game. You're
was.
only calling in to say comparing Israel, Palestine to Hatfields and McCoys was a big mistake. Okay, fine. I'll just concede right now, probably was a mistake. What I come up with off the top of my head, but if you can't figure out how a fucking phone works and when you're alive while you're going by the name Anonymous, stop picking names you don't fucking respond to. John in California, you get to be the final caller of the day. Welcome. Or maybe you don't.
Come on, John.
Don't let me down. All right. Well, John had potential solutions to the Israel-Palestine conflict. And we'll just pretend that John solved the problem. Anybody who thinks they've got a genuine solution, don't call this show because I have no power to implement anything. Call the United Nations, call the president, post it somewhere, get some traction. I know maybe these viewers will, but doggone it, I don't have an answer to that. So it's super chat time. And let me run through a few things first, because now is when people are like, oh, they're going to read all super chats over $10. And then you guys get your stuff in and then we start reading them. And then there's a parade of a bunch of them. And I'm just excited. Quickly for the announcements, though, as a reminder, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central, basically 6 hours earlier than right now, but tomorrow, Transatlantic Call-In Show with Katy and Arden. Wow. My meds have given me the hiccups or burps at the same time. Sunday show will be myself and Dave Warnock. That's also at 2 p.m. So 6 o'clock or 6 hours earlier than now on Sunday. Then on Monday, Erica Gutzik-Gibbon will be first time hosting Skeptalk on Monday. If you don't tune in, I don't even want to know you. I'm going to be busy cleaning up after rats, and I'm going to be tuned in. Tuesdays, Dave Warnock and Seth Andrews, the reschedule from last week. And next Wednesday, I'll be back with another hang up, we think. That is all those announcements.
That's going to be a job for you. I got the sneak peek on that action of the rats. So have fun with that.
It's every Monday. We've got it to where we can pretty much knock it out in less than 3 hours if we really dig in. But we also take breaks.
It's an impressive amount. Let's put it that way.
It's a lot of work. All right, let's get on to the super chats and close it out that way. Boom. We have 25 something.
Could not tell you.
I couldn't tell you either. But from Rafael Vittorati, Matt, 15 years ago, you changed my life. Thank you. Sincerely, all the best. Oh, thanks so much. I'm just going to assume I changed it for the better instead of for the worse, because if I changed it for the worse, I'd have to apologize, and I don't think you'd be giving me money. So we're going to alternate these if you can see them, Mike.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. I was chopping on my end.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna let you know we were.
I can read it. I can read it if you want. I just couldn't hear what you were saying. $10 from Pibblepunk, the apativist. I hope I'm saying that right. I often keep silent about being bold. Apifist. Yeah, that sounds like a Gutzik-Gibbon word to pronounce it, not me. I often kept silent about being bullied in school because my very religious parent would always respond to complaints by searching for a way to blame me for it. Seems to be common amongst Christians. Thank you for the $10.
Thanks, Pibblepunk. Yeah.
Seems to be common in my I had a pretty fortunate situation with me, at least with my parents are Christians, but I don't know that I could have gotten a better way of being able to think for myself, but that did amalgamate to like being a new age spiritualist. And I wanted to explain to that guy about all the experimenting with drugs with the shamanism. I'm just like raising my hand like, it's just cool. That's all you need. It's just I'm not advocating. Allegedly it's cool. Okay. So.
It really, it's kind of sad that people need to find an excuse to do something that they enjoy, that probably isn't hurting them or anybody else. I don't know why you would need justification for that. It's like, people, oh, please justify why you're doing this, because I freaking felt like it. The same reason. So
Yeah.
I watched The Golden Bachelor the other night. It's not a show that I probably would have normally watched on my own, but watching it with Arden's actually fun because I get to trash talk the show and try to come up with clever things. It's like an exercise in making jokes or, doing live commentary on something. I like the Golden Bachelor dude at first, although now I'm really just kind of annoyed with him. He's like too good, too sickeningly sweet and all that stuff. So I just get to rag on the show. It's funny. But I'm really kind of...
Is there a big difference between the Golden Bachelor? I'm not familiar with the series as much.
They're really old. He's like 71.
Oh, okay.
It's a new experiment. But I'm really bothered by what Pibblepunk's saying because, and I'm pretty sure Apistivist is referencing Aron's thing, but then adding ape in front of it instead of Apistivist. But the notion, I was bullied like anybody else on rare occasions. I wasn't consistently bullied. As a matter of fact, after we moved in my 8th grade year, I played more soccer. I went to a high school that had 960 some odd kids in the graduating class. I was on student council. And so that's a weird position because you're not like hated and mocked, or at least you weren't then, but you're not super popular. But I can't imagine, like, if I was being bullied at school and came home and told my parents about it, there's no way they would have even thought to find a way to blame me. And it's really troubling to read that you were dealing with this where I'd love to have a conversation with Pibblepunk at some point, because I'm wondering if this is about the nature of the bullying. If, for example, I'm not trying to reach any conclusions about anybody, but if you were queer and bullied for being queer, then I can understand why religious parents would have objections to that. If you, were goth or punk or, Pibblepunk, maybe. If you were different, counterculture, alterno cool compared to others, and that was something your parents also opposed, then yeah, I could see maybe what process they would go through to blame you. But the notion that parents could blame their kids for their kids being bullied, like, I know it's something that I should be familiar with and shouldn't be shocked by, and yet I just find myself sitting here stuck going, I mean, I've helped kids who've become atheists, whose parents kicked them out. We've helped some of them find new places to live. I've dealt with my own parents thinking I'm working for the devil, and my ex-wife's parents thinking I am the devil, and all this stuff. But that's as an adult. I can't imagine being bullied in school and then having your parents blame you for it. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you are, or I hope that you are, out from underneath that yoke. That you'll probably carry the baggage of that for a while, but I hope that you realize this wasn't you. This is them, and it's not even a normal them, and not even a normal Christian them. There's something else that was going on. And I hope that you're out from under that and doing much better now. But thank you so much for the donation and for the thought-provoking thing. 1999 from Greg Markowski. There you go. Welcome. Thanks so much, Greg. During last week's show, I prophesied J-Mike would be your guest this week. I should write a book. You should. And if you'd have written it before I announced it, then you would have had one prediction that came true. But how you knew that
I want lottery.
True. What's that?
I want lottery numbers from numbers from this person if that's the case before you announced it. So
yeah, let's
see if we go 2 for 2.
Numbers. It's like 1 point some odd billion or something now.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. $20 from Sloan. I've been running the sound system at the church for nearly 8 years. They don't know I've been an atheist since this March, and currently typing this this while service is going on. Glad to say in 2 weeks I won't be attending anymore. Well, sounds like you've given a 2 week, so to speak, and welcome. I'm very happy that's the case, and that's a really cool feeling to like kind of to know it's like somebody's at the end of this and they're watching the show, and because like I would watch all these shows or Matt's debates and stuff, like delivering, like I probably shouldn't say I was watching, I'd rather should say I was listening on my phone, delivering pizzas and stuff like that. And so I didn't have a similar experience with coming out of a church or anything like that, but I know very vaguely what it feels like to feel like you've stumbled on something that's like helping you become a better person, a better reasoner. It's like you wake up each day like I want to learn more. I want to read more. I want to look at more stuff. And it's just a really cool experience. So I hope that you're in that kind of, if that's where you're at, it's a beautiful place to be, at least from my position. I don't have the baggage. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that comes with the trauma and all that I got to skate by with. But I think that this is a great time for you to digest a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and congrats. And by the way, you're not the only atheist that works at a church, and some of them keep doing it for many years. I thought you were going to say that you'd been there for 8 years as an atheist at first when I started reading it, which would be very cool. But yeah, congrats. I'm glad you don't need to keep doing that. Some people though need to do it, and I'm not gonna put anybody down for caring for themselves and their family by holding a job that, hey, everybody who works at a church is taking money from that church and supporting an atheist. But 10 euros from Yordim. If someone tells me something mundane, like he saw a dog on the street, is it really that this is enough to believe it, or should we only believe it's possible and look for actual evidence? I did a video not too long on this subject, about whether or not claims are evidence, because so many people get confused over this. If somebody tells me they got a pet dog, or said they got a dog on the street, it's not just the claim that I have. I already know dogs exist. I know that dogs can walk on the street. I know that people see dogs on the street. I know that people like to talk about seeing dogs out and about. All of these things, the mountain of facts about reality, are entirely consistent with this claim. And so when somebody tells me that, my position is I'm willing to accept that they are accurately conveying information that is wholly mundane and consistent with the world. I also acknowledge they could be lying, but my default position isn't to say you're lying or that's not true. If they said that they saw a parade of ghosts juggling hot dogs in the street, I would have more questions. Were these people dressed as ghosts, or was it, whatever? Things change.
Like imagine that
So
they even got like a water bowl and fur and food, a collar, and they put that around their house. Like, I still think it's like people you don't have a background information of people doing this elaborate scheme to get you on. Oh, I totally got you. I said I got a dog, and I didn't. I put the fur out, and I put the water bowl and all that stuff. But it's just so contrary to like the background. Like it's more rational for me to believe that you actually just got a dog off face value than it is for you to have set up this elaborate scheme, given that my background information has like 0 cases of that. And in fact, I could pull people on the street like, has anyone ever like done this to you? And nobody is going to be like, oh yeah, I remember when Jerry just like really fucked with my head talking about how I got this dog and laid out all this evidence to support it. But he pulled it on me somehow.
There's no reason to run around thinking that you're probably on candid camera all the time. If anybody even remembers candid camera or Punked or whatever, the notion that you were actually having this practical joke play on it, to begin with that as the most probable seems to be a mistake. Instead, you should begin with you proportion your confidence level in any particular explanation to its prevalence. But
$4.99 from John Doan. Doan. I'm sorry for these pronunciations. Hello from California. Our species is doomed like all other life. The Middle East is the perfect reason to not believe in God, especially a loving God.
Yeah. It's one of those things. You could make a case for why, pick it, the God of the Jews, the God of the Muslims, whichever one, you could make a case for why he's not helping them wage war against each other. But can you also make a case for why he's allowing them to kill and starve children? I mean, shouldn't there be some other way? Wouldn't it be nice if God would just step up and say, excuse me, I am the head motherfucker in charge. I gave this land to the Jews. Everybody else go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And, you know, that'd be nice. I mean, it'd be terrible and it'd be shocking and it'd be surprising, but at least he'd have done something and he might have ended some bloodshed. Or we're going to draw a line right here and all the Jews are going to go north of this line. All the Muslims are going to go south of this line. Boom. By the way, you're all wrong. And so are the Christians. You know, whatever. I mean, anything like that. I know I get it. There's believers there that hear me say stuff like that and they just shake their head and they're like, God, listen to this atheist. God's not going to do stuff like that. Don't you understand anything, you stupid atheist? God can't reveal himself. Why? Why can't or won't God reveal himself like that? If that God turns out to be an absolute asshole, I'm still not going to worship him. I'll believe that he exists, but I'm never going to worship him. I'm not the coward here. I'm not the one who doesn't understand. You're the one who is making excuses for a God you can't demonstrate exists. You're the one who is siding with people, killing other people on behalf of gods none of them can demonstrate exist.
If I could cut in really quickly, I just want to point out to chat that this is a $5 super chat. We normally the threshold is 10, but John sent a second $5 to get this read. So don't start sending fives. The threshold is still 10. They just, yeah.
Well, thanks, John.
Double up. Thank you, John.
10 euros from your team again. How can we differentiate between design and what occurs naturally when, for example, what the human brain does is just a natural process? Isn't everything we know of just a natural process?
Oh, I could write a book about this.
Yes, everything we know of is just a natural process. But we recognize design by what occurs naturally without the intervention of agents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, without...
Yeah, we have back... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, so yeah, we have background information on this. We can see, you know, agents using material like non-table material like nails and wood and forming them into tables. We have a good set of background information. But on the theistic hypothesis, or at least on a hypothesis where everything is designed, I get really confused on how you could ever pick up like two objects and adjudicate which object would be designed or not designed, given that in that view, everything is designed. There's like not a real comparative analysis on what would be designed and isn't. Whereas under this view, you have undesigned things like rocks that people take. We have background information on such that you could build, I don't know, stone houses or whatever with them. But it seems like the naturalist or the person who's not saying that everything is designed actually has some like meat on the bones for a comparative analysis, whereas the design hypothesis, there is no undesigned thing. So I don't know how you could even get off the ground or make that analysis without assuming that they were designed in the beginning from the start place. That's kind of my view, at least.
Dennis Loubet, long ago on an episode of Nonprofits, talked about Paley's watchmaker analogy. And in that scenario, you pick it up, and because it's different from the sand, you can conclude that it's designed. But in a universe where God created everything, you're walking on a beach of watches and picking up one watch and saying this watch is distinct. And that's a problem. It's probably a linguistic problem to contrast naturally occurring and designed. It would probably be better to describe it as intentionally designed by an agent versus occurring without the intervention of an agent. So, for example, this pair of glasses that I'm wearing, if there wasn't an agent to design these, there's no reason to think this could ever naturally occur. The elements of it, none of them, each one of them has been designed. Whereas if you look at a blade of grass, that does occur naturally all the time without intervention from an agent. But we got another one, another 10 years from your team. Great questions, and you're donating, so we'll just sit here and keep answering them. This one's, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, $10 from Jordan. Why aren't debates usually structured in a way that the side that is trying to make a case for God has to provide the arguments in advance so that the contra side can prepare properly? Why aren't debates usually structured in a way that the side trying to make a case?
Because if we did that,
yeah.
If granted, there's nothing wrong with that. I've told people what arguments I'm going to present before. That some of my opponents have told me what arguments they're going to present before. But then the fair thing to do is for once they tell me what their arguments are, then I should send them my rebuttals as well, so that they have time to prepare for my rebuttals, and then they'll have to send me their rebuttals to my rebuttals. And now you're in a correspondence debate rather than a live debate.
Yeah.
There are debates that work that way. I'm just not somebody who does them.
Yeah, I tried to do that in a debate once with somebody, and they wanted to know my view on Jesus as like an apocalypticist, and they were like, well, just lay out the land for me. I was like, okay, I did that, and then it just turned out to being like, we're having the discussion and the debate, and I was like, I mean, when you asked me for more stuff, we could have just started the debate this way, right? We shouldn't have just started at like 6 kind of email exchanges down the line. We should just done the debate. You knew the topic, and yeah, anyway.
This is already, I just skimmed it. Claire has presented my favorite comment of the day, and one which I wish I would have said. So $10 from poor Claire. Is Sid saying people with genetic flaws live longer now due to scientific advances causing a worse gene pool leading to extinction? If the flaws can't stop people from having babies, how can they kill humanity? That's the thing. If there is genetic degradation and humans will eventually go extinct, right now our technology is beating the rate of that decline. We are living longer lives and healthier lives and better lives. And our population, the rate of population increase is tapering off, even though the population continues to increase. The rate of increase is decreasing. Yeah, I wish I had thought to say something like that, because if the case is our DNA is degrading and we're going to go extinct because of that, that seems to be contraindicated by the fact that we are living longer. And while the rate of population increase is not as steep as it once was, we're still, increasing. We're going to die from climate change before anything in our genetic code.
Well, the point of the argument is at some point we all just fall down. That's the genetic entropy issue. We just fall down dead. I that's a really good point, Claire, because I don't even understand like what you would think, like how you think. It's just so strange to me. Like, oh no, that's true, Matt, Claire. But the problem is like it just gives out on us, and we just all fall and collapse. Like, is that how it works?
Cookies just ask, how do I know this is my favorite comment when I haven't read them all yet? Fair. I can really only say that it's my favorite so far. There could be another one. Maybe even from Claire.
Well, you're not on the left side of the screen anymore. Sorry, I was reading that in my head. 999 from Balthazar. I can't read today. 228. Easily definable God, a handsome, bespected. Is this supposed to be respectable? Bespectacled debate God named Matt on the left side of the screen. I feel like I just botched that whole thing, but I'm just going to point out that you're not on the left side of the screen.
And I'm not a god, but you know what? That's a better God definition than the one we got. $9.99 from Port Claire, but I'm not a scientist, and I don't know if that was what they were saying anyway. Arden, go conceptually impoverish yourself. Thanks so much, Claire. I think you caught on to what they were saying and the problem with what they were saying. A problem that we both missed, by the way. $19.99 from Balthazar 228. The more I learned in my physics, astrophysics, and quantum mechanical studies, the more I became disappointed with how unimaginative all the man-made myths were. The actual way the universe functions is far more interesting. I've heard that from people before, but also that same type of reasoning gets used by doctors who believe in a God. The human body is remarkable. It's not nearly as resilient as reptile bodies that can regrow, appendages and stuff like that, but we're pretty resilient. We have lots of ways to fight off infections. We have ways to, cancer can go into remission. We have ways to heal ourselves, etc. And we reproduce life. And there are some doctors, despite knowing a great deal about how the body functions, that are so overwhelmed by that knowledge that they just use it to say, clearly this was designed by a God. And so it'd be kind of similar to say, the man-made myths are rather unimaginative. The universe is far more interesting. I agree, but it's not going to be a good enough argument to knock down somebody's theistic thing, I don't think. But it's a good point to make.
$10 from BW Dingus. Great show, Matt and J Mike. Arden and crew are the best. Thank you. And yes.
Awesome. Thanks, BW Dingus. My new earbuds suck, and they really get to hurting after about an hour or two.
I got the same ones, I think, as you, sure, and they broke on me today, so I got one ear now.
$10 from Alex Gordon. How do you guys view the disagreement between anti-theism and atheism? Is it our moral obligation to be as outspoken as we can, or is it morally acceptable for us to choose our battles at such time? I would need to know what you mean by anti-theism and atheism, because for me, atheism is simply not being convinced that a God exists. Anti-theism is direct opposition to the theistic proposition. I take it very literally. I think there's a little bit of a moral obligation, but not to be as outspoken as you can. Well, as you can kind of does a lot of the work there. To be outspoken to the extent that it's safe to do so, that it's productive to do so. It's a lot. I think we just have a moral obligation to do our best to make the world better.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I do want to say, Alex, I've seen, hopefully this isn't like too upfront, but I've seen you in comment sections on YouTube videos and stuff. I like your head. You seem to have good things to say in the comment sections that I stumble upon. So just wanted to shout that out.
Sweet.
$20 from Larry Fishman. Fishman, I can't see if there's an L there. Sorry, my eyes are terrible. The sad reality is a lot of baby boomers got married and had kids purely because they felt expected to. They ended up in unhappy marriages and blamed their kids for their own choices rather than getting divorced.
Yeah. The advent of making divorce more acceptable, I think that was long overdue and a great change. So thanks a lot for that insight, Larry. $49.99.
Wow.
Holy macaroni from Dane Strickland with no comment.
That's it.
So thanks, Metric Fuckton. Much appreciated.
Yeah, wow. That actually shows a lot. If someone's like, hey, I want to support, I don't care if what I have to say is read. Like that's really cool. It means you really, really care to support. So that's awesome. Not that anybody else doesn't. Not taken away from all the people with their words, but that is really cool. $10 from SJL. Belief is knowledge without sufficient evidence. Faith is knowledge without and despite evidence. I can believe in something I partially understand. That's not the same as faith. Agree or no? Belief is knowledge without sufficient evidence. Faith is knowledge without It depends on how we're defining knowledge and
Yeah, I'm going to disagree
belief.
all over this.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with this myself. I just take a belief to be an attitude towards a proposition. I take something like knowledge to be like a justified true belief, or I don't think me and Matt want to get into Gettier cases or anything like that, but I think that most people, the concept that they're tracking is something like a justified true belief. And so I think because of that, I'm not going to really agree with this analysis.
Yeah.
I just take faith to be like, I really, really, really believe this thing to be true. Like my attitude towards the proposition is like extremely, high, but that could be for all the wrong reasons. That just doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree on technical reasons, but I'm going to agree in what I think you mean. Being convinced of something, knowledge is a subset of belief. There's all the things you believe, and then some of them you actually count as knowledge. And what the justification for that is, we'll just set aside. But to get to your question, you say you can believe in something that you partially understand. I think that you can accept the part that you understand. For example, string theory. In many aspects, string theory seems like an unfalsifiable magic proposition to me. So I don't believe string theory. But what I do believe is that among the experts who do understand this much better than I do, there is agreement to some extent on some aspects of string theory. And so I have confidence in those only to the extent that I understand them. And that is not faith, because I'm not believing or not using faith as the excuse for me believing it. I'm saying I have a reasonable confidence that these experts are more accurate about something that I don't understand than I am, but I'm not going to pretend to understand the parts that I don't get. So, hope that gets close enough. $10 from Melissa Eater. Australia is messing up the yes vote. Uh-oh. I haven't followed and paid attention because of all the other stuff. My country is a broken mess, and the Israel-Palestine thing's a broken mess. So I haven't followed the broken mess in Australia. I appreciate it. I'll go spend some time looking it up, but thank you so much, Melissa.
$9.99 from CW. Thank you, Matt, for helping me step away from my Catholic faith. You made me think without the religious blinders on. I'm working on loving myself again and letting go of Catholic guilt.
Awesome. Well, thank you for saying so, and you're very welcome. I'm glad if anything we've ever said has been useful for people. $10 from Pipple the Apistivist. To elucidate, when a parent is 1, chronically overworked or exhausted, and 2, concerned with projecting the image of being a good Christian family, you may get in trouble for voicing your problems. Okay.
I see.
Yeah, that to me sounds like bad parenting. I can understand anybody can get overwhelmed, and certainly, like, I think Mormons are especially, I was going to say good, but especially bad about projecting a positive image, as are others, where it's like, oh, don't do this, you'll bring shame on the family, or you'll disgrace the church type of thing. I think one of the worst things I saw parents do to kids that I've seen many of them do, and it just leapt into my head just now, is when a parent will tell a kid, be on your best behavior, don't be weird, when they're going to, they want to keep up appearances and everything else. And, I'm happy to encourage kids to be well behaved and exercise some good manners in public. But this notion of don't be weird because it might shame the family, or whatever, that really makes me angry. You can be as weird as you want, If you're creating a disturbance, if you're being a jackass, if you're being disruptive, okay, we need to rein that in. But a lot of kids might say something. You might have had the world's next great comedian that just got entirely shot down by simply saying, don't be weird, because you were worried about the shame that it might bring you for somebody to think you had a weird kid. And then you exacerbate that by parents who are afraid that, oh my gosh, we might have a gay kid or a trans kid or whatever else. I mean, here we are trying to get people to just generally treat kids better. And oh, by the way, treating them better means let's not slaughter them over an argument about land rights and people's rights.
$10 from Dylan Fuller. When explaining that progressive Christians don't have a biblical leg to stand on, what are some good rebuttals to them saying that that's a no true Scotsman? I know it's not, but I suck at debating.
Oh, so if you're saying to a Christian, hey, the thing that you're saying isn't biblical, and they're basically replying with, well, that's a no true Scotsman because I don't have to be biblical to be a Christian. The Bible could be wrong about stuff. They could very well be right. It could be the case that God has directly revealed something to them, either through a sensus divinatus or whatever else, through the Holy Spirit. And you have no way to disprove that. But the thing to point out is they have no way to prove it. If two people come up to me and tell me that the Holy Spirit each gave them a message, it's, as David Hume pointed out, to them it's revelation, to everybody else it's hearsay. And if their religion is based on the Bible, they do need to make some accounting of which parts they ignore and why.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to say, oh, I accept this part because, it's comforting. If they're going to accept the Bible as an authoritative book on the subject for part of it, they need to at least make a case for why they ignored it for other parts. Why is it? Oh, they're fine with, I'm happy for all the gay friendly churches, but they're full of shit if they think that what they're doing is biblical. If you don't override a specific rule by a general feeling. I think everybody needs to play more board games where you have a general rule that is overridden by a specific rule, and you have an older rule that's overridden by a newer rule. And so when the Bible says, if a man lies with a man as he lies with a woman, they're committing an abomination or deserving of death, that's a pretty specific rule that is also pretty old. And so you would need a new rule that specifically overrides that and says that that's no longer the case. You don't get to say, well, the Bible says love your neighbor as yourself. And so that does it. You can engage in that. It just, when you say they don't have a biblical leg to stand on, go ahead.
You just got to justify the principle, the interpretive principle you have. I mean, if you're going to make this distinction, like, okay, well, in some cases, this literal interpretive principle applies. It's applicable in some other cases. Well, then it's like, well, in virtue of what is the principle you're invoking correct? Because, I mean, what we want, hopefully, is to correspond to what God intends for us to understand, right? That's supposed to be the point. And if it just turns out that there isn't actually a justification, you can just ask this kind of question, like, okay, well, look, help me understand what justifies this interpretive principle that you employ here that's like metaphoric or more progressive leaning, as opposed to this other one. How do you know? And how do you know that? Because when I'm talking to someone like Matt, maybe the first time I talk to Matt or Arden, I don't get like a good feel, and they say something to me, and maybe I'm not interpreting them correctly. But as I build rapport, I hang out and have background information, it's easier for me to interpret their body language. It's easy for me to interpret the words that they use in specific order. And it all builds up such that I can create a hypothesis on what I think most likely Matt meant by that expression, as opposed to these other things. And it's going to be really hard for people that don't have the background information on Matt to construct a more reliable hypothesis than myself. And if it just turns out that, well, in no case in the text can I construct a hypothesis on what God intends without using the thing that we're trying to interpret as attributes of how God would like us to interpret it, it just becomes this big circular mess. And then I'm just left there going, well, I don't need to invoke no true Scotsman. I just need you to give me an analysis or a justification on which interpretive principle applies where and how you go about justifying it, and how you know it aligns with God's intention, even if we assume God exists. And I think, for me, I think that's like a final nail in the coffin for scripturally based text that's trying to report someone's intentions. You can always interpret those words any way you'd like.
Yep. That's a key thing I've said before that I don't think any reasonable, good God would ever choose to communicate via languages that change and die out, let alone in text alone. Text messages and messages on Twitter and messages in Facebook Messenger. How many times has there been a misunderstanding between people that you know getting it wrong? Like when Mike was down here, if he's sitting on the couch playing guitar and I just look at him and go, oh, that's crap. He knows I'm fucking with him because he plays good and he plays better than I do. And so he knows there's sarcasm there. But if he sent me an audio recording of something that he was playing on the guitar and said, hey, what do you think? And I just sent back a text that said, that's crap. Even knowing me, he might, if he's engaged in self-doubt or whatever, he might not know that I'm just messing with him or whatever else. And, you know, this is one in a world where we know the people and we know sarcasm. So the first thing to assume is that God doesn't use sarcasm. But evidently God uses metaphor and analogy and similes and parables and all sorts of things that are intended to obscure meaning. And you've got people running around saying that they've got the correct understanding. They sussed out what it means. This is why there are over 1,000 denominations that all identify as Christian and disagree on virtually every single point of doctrine possible. And that's not their fault. If there's a God, it's God's fault for not being clear. And if there's not a God, then it's our fault for not recognizing that.
Oh, sorry.
$15 from an Entangled Loam. Thank you, Matt, for the Daniel H. debate review. Looking forward to parts 2 and 3. Grateful we have Matt stand up to bullies like Dan who advocate for child marriage. Love to see J. Mike back. Me too. And of course, go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Sweet. We're at 2 more.
2 more. $10 from Chronic Bro. I just think that it's really cool that I have the opportunity to shout out Matt Dillahunty. I don't have the words to say how thankful I am over the years of diligent passion you've brought to this space. And I'll echo that. I would say it's really cool to be a part of a show with Matt. So take how you feel and multiply that. Like I feel cool by association. Like I'm hanging out with Matt today. What's up?
Don't. I'm cool by association with J. Mike. That's what it is.
Oh yeah.
And potentially the last super chat of the day, 100 Norwegian krona from Bjorn S. Just wanted to thank the awesome host, chat, and last but not least, Arden and crew for helping me ease through these last almost 3 hours at work. Thank you so much for the mental assistance. Thank you, Bjorn. And thank everybody who donated today. Thanks everybody who tuned in today. Thank you hugely to the Apostate Paul for screening some great calls. Thanks to our callers who called in, including the ones where clearly we're not going to make any more progress today. Don't forget to tune in for TACIS tomorrow at 2. The Sunday show will be me and Dave, and you can tune in for that. In the meantime, the world's falling apart. You're going to hear over many, many times over the next couple of weeks for sure. Wars and rumors of wars. It's all coming true. It's all about the end of times. Remember that you live, if you're living in the United States, in a secular country that is dominated by Christians who have a default pro-Israel stance, in part because they think that Armageddon begins with a war in Israel. Whether that's their primary reason or not, religion has its fingers in this. But that doesn't mean that everything that's happening right now is in any way the fault of religion. People are petty. People are hateful. People are terrified. People want freedom and rights. Palestinian people have legitimate objections. Israeli people have legitimate concerns. There's a lot that's going to happen, and this could lead to World War III. Americans have already died. That's a big warning sign. You have other wars going on. None of it means that the apocalypse is coming. None of it means that Jesus is on his way back. What it all means is that the best thing we can do is to continue to advocate for humanism, for reasonableness, for skepticism, for peace. And if we have to, every single day, remind people that they're fucking killing children for an issue that's been stagnant with nothing but fighting for over 75 years now, since the last time we tried desperately to find a way to fix this, then that's what we should do. Stop killing kids. People in Gaza, average age is 18. That's not a good longevity. There's no good quality of life there. Is it any wonder that they're turning to desperate means and some of the most vile terrorist organizations on the planet because they're stuck in an open air prison? Listen to what Bernie said. He said it better than I'm going to. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Tune in for TACIS tomorrow. Bye-bye. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Kitty says thanks.
We don't allow kitties on this show.
Airtime.
Only lizards and snakes. No more kitties. I don't know. That's a good thing.